Fall of Yami Round 2 Part 3. After Kula finished defeating Yui, a deadly silence fell upon the frozen battlefield. None of the members of Yami could believe the great amount of destruction that little girl could unleash at a moment's notice. Again it seemed Pan was not the only one that dared to keep an eye on. Just how much destructive abilities did Pan's followers were hiding? But for those that still remained on the now frozen battlefield, such thoughts were unimportant, for they had more immediate concerns. Like how they were going to keep fighting now that a layer of ice was covering the ground. As they found themselves having trouble on gaining a good footing. "Whoa!" Angel exclaimed, waving her arms around, as she corrected her standing after almost slipping on the ice. "Just great, how are we supposed to end our fights now? I can barely stand because of all this ice," the white-haired Latina complained. Nameless, who managed to hear her from where he was standing, just scoffed unconcerned. "This little nuisance is barely a hindrance to me," he stated, before he let out a roar and expelled his ki outwards in a ring of fire that traveled throughout the frozen field and melted the ice around Nameless, evaporating all trace of water and leaving a sizable circle of thawed earth in the middle of the ice field. Luckily for Nameless' opponent, Kojima, he had been thrown through a considerable distance after being repelled by Nameless' previous attack that the ring of fire burned out before it managed to get close to him. Iori Yagami too had no trouble in getting rid of the ice. "As the same thing for me," he declared, before releasing his own burst of purple fire that swept over the ice around him. However, his own display of power looked more intimidating and painful than Nameless' own. As Iori let out a thunderous scream of pain and rage that shocked the core of all who heard it, the flames unleashed by him burned with a bright intensity as they lashed violently and wildly towards anything standing in their path as some kind of savage animal. To those who did not know much about Iori, it would seem as if his own flames caused him as much harm to him as it did to his enemies. A very accurate assumption, for unlike the Kusanagi's flames, the fire wielded by the Yagami clan was the cursed flames of the Orochi, an evil fire whose sole purpose was to destroy humanity. It was a great testament to the strength of the Yagami clan that their ancestors had managed to wrestle against these flames and taken control over them despite their tendency of trying to eradicate all living things. With the field cleared of any obstacle, the battles promptly resumed. Even Angel was able to get back on her fight as the flames released by both fire wielders had been potent enough to melt the ice on her section of the field. Not that surprising since her battle was taking place between those other two. Kojima Satomi vs Nameless. Satomi finally managed to stand up after being burned badly by Nameless, the small reprieve unwittingly given to him by Kula when she froze the entire field, giving him the time needed to recover somewhat from his injuries. He raised his guard up and looked towards his opponent. "Oh, I see you're up again. That's good, let us end with this already," he said, taking a stance of his own. "You'll find that I'm not that easy to put down," Kojima snarled, insulted by Nameless dismissing him as a warrior. He began to arrange his toes in a strange position before he once more rushed towards Nameless. The young clone knew he must be using one of his techniques to amplify his physical prowess due to the odd positioning of his toes. Nameless had to leap away in order to avoid Kojima's kicks. He knew if those strikes connected they would cause him severe damage. Kojima wasn't deterred by Nameless' evasion and went after him, launching a barrage of kicks towards his opponent. Nameless was hard-pressed to evade them all, as not only the strength of eye patch-wearing fighter had increased but also his speed. He almost got his head caved in by an axe kick but managed to avoid it at the last moment. Kojima's foot connected with the ground, cracking the earth and creating a thick cloud of dust. Sokuinsou Koshu seal. Nameless tried to take this opportunity to retaliate and launched a quick short kick towards Kojima's abdomen, but the one-eyed young man intercepted the attack by grazing the offending limb and used his superior bulk to lift Nameless off the ground altogether, before whipping the helpless fire user into the ground, smashing him into the uncaring earth several times all around him with great strength. Amanome Tamahage Uchi. Nameless was lashed into the ground savagely one last time before being tossed aside, grunting in pain at his wounds. Despite the brutal beating he had just received, the young clone tried to get up again despite the protests of his injured body. Seeing his opponent defenseless on his knees, trying to stand up again, Kojima decided to press his advantage. He began to take an odd stance where he retracted his right fist back while lifting both his left arm and leg up in the air, leaving him standing in only his right foot. Nameless saw him and began to wonder about it. What is he doing now? Damn it. It's probably another of his techniques to amplify the physical abilities of his body. I need to get on my feet again and prepare a counterattack. Nameless thought with urgency, knowing he hadn't time to waste if he wanted to come out of this fight victorious. He managed to rise up back again just in time as Atomy launched his attack. Mugetsu no Mai. Kajima's fist sailed through the air towards Nameless, the force behind the attack displacing the air around him. In an act of desperation, Nameless quickly took his glove off from his left hand and launched a large crimson circular red flame that struck Kajima and burned him several times over. Chisou Katame Shudu Ikusawaza Suarabi. The attack was not enough to stop Kajima from completing his offensive, as he plowed through the flames with his fist, but the fire did injure him enough to slow him down a bit, giving Nameless enough time to come with a follow-up. The blue-haired white-streaked young man swinged his left arm forwards to strike at Kajima again with a sizable red ember flame that he charged inside his hand. The moment the flame connected, it struck the eye patch-wearing fighter with enough force to send him into the air with great height. Taikuu Katame Shudu Ikusawaza Yoitasuki. Nameless did not let go on the offensive and leapt after Kajima while launching a red arc of fire. They struck the airborne fighter several times, injuring him further. Kyoushu Katame Shudu Ikusawaza Amagirakata. The eye patch-wearing fighter fell roughly upon the ground, Nameless landing close to him, having difficulties to keep himself steady due to his wounds and letting out a flinch because of it. Kajima struggled to rise to his feet despite his own injuries. Both fighters were roughly in the same equal conditions, as both had received a great amount of damage. Most likely the next attack would be the one that would decide the match. Nameless was preparing already for his next technique. It is over. This battle will be mine, he declared before his arm transformed into a giant drill that was almost as big as him and tried to ram it into Kajima, just as K-9999 had done to Berserker. We're Kaden Katatakan Ugi Razan. Against all logic, instead of trying to evade the incoming drill, Kajima stood his ground and took the attack in full, not before focusing his ki inside his body. The drill rammed into Kajima, trying to pierce his skin, but to the surprise of Nameless, his attack was unable to wound the one-eyed fighter. But of course it was not that easy for Satomi to endure the attack. The constant fast and sharp rotations were causing him a lot of pain. If he were to lose his focus for just a moment, the giant drill would surely skewer him. Ah, Rentagai. Nameless was obviously gobsmacked by this new development. How was it that this man could take his attack in full without getting rammed through? How is it possible? Despite the great strain his body was under, Kajima Satomi couldn't help but smirk. By focusing my ki and exploding it inside my body, I can harden my muscles and resist any kind of attack. Your technique is useless against my Rentagai. Nameless could hardly believe what he was hearing. His giant drill kept trying to puncture Kajima, but the eye patch-wearing fighter kept withstanding the great force pushing against him. He even began to fight back. Kajima closed his arms and tried to grab the giant drill's head. A desperate struggle between the two opposite forces. Kajima eventually managed to get the upper hand. With a mighty heave he managed to push the spinning enough to a side to deflect it away from him, the sharp tip burying itself in the ground and kicking up a thick screen of smoke. Impossible. Kajima was not done yet, as he concentrated his ki once more and used it to deliver a devastating counterattack against Nameless. He forced his ki to explode outwards from his arm as his fist connected with Nameless' sternum, the great amount of life energy gathered in Kajima's arm becoming easily visible, making his arm look as if it was enveloped in some kind of ethereal fire. The fist impacted with an incredible force, causing Nameless to reach, the energy from Kajima's attack invading his body and coursing through his own pathways, exploding from every single pore. Nameless fell, releasing smoke, into the ground, feeling his entire body burning from the inside. The attack also seemed to have brought Kajima harm, for his own pores ignited and exploded, blowing him backwards a little. He seemed to falter but managed to remain on his feet with some difficulty. Shinogitachi. It is over. I have attacked your meridian points directly, cutting the key flow of your body. With this technique I can forcibly close your pressure points and shut down your bodily functions. There's nothing else to do but wait for your imminent defeat. True, I too was injured by my own technique, since my Shinogitachi requires that I make my own meridians to explode by forcibly gathering my ki inside them, but as a sacrifice I'm willing to make if it will allow me to gain victory today. Kojima declared with confidence, despite the mangled state of his body or the blood dribbling from the corner of his mouth. Why would you risk to cripple yourself in that way just to win? Nameless managed to ask, struggling against the failure of his own body. Because this is the only way to show my gratitude to the art for giving me a new chance for life. Kojima replied, growing serious. You see, I was born with a weak sickly body. I could barely take a few steps on my own before falling down in a fit of coughs. The doctors diagnosed that I wouldn't live to reach my 20th birthday. With the terrible notion that I would not have a future, I lost all my hopes for tomorrow and decided that I would do whatever I wanted without caring for consequences, as having the sentence of my impending demise hanging over me made me think nothing could be worse than what the cruel hand of destiny had in store for me. Among those things I decided to do, was practicing martial arts. As I had never the chance of practicing any kind of sport or fighting style due to the sick state of my body, I decided to become a practitioner of the art before my life reached its end. I dedicated my body and soul to the perfection of my skills. Since I no longer had any fear of death, I subjected myself to terrible and brutal trainings to mastering my art. Whereas the other grandmasters saw a sickly boy without any kind of talent, Sensui-sensei saw potential in me and took me under his wing. He put me through hellish and terrible training regimens so I could forcefully gain the talent I needed in order to dominate any kind of martial art. They were particularly harsh and demanding and required that I made many sacrifices in order to accomplish them. Kojima trailed off as he touched the patch over his missing eye. But thanks to this hellish training a miracle occurred. My body grew stronger over time and managed to overcome its own weakness, allowing me to get rid of my sickness and giving me the chance of staying alive. So you see, the reason why I'm standing here right now, breathing in front of you, fighting you with all my strength to achieve victory, is all because of martial arts. Thanks to them I am alive, thanks to them I now have a future, thanks to martial arts I managed against all odds to heal from my sickness, to beat my all but assured demise. I owe my life to martial arts and Sensui-sensei, and to show my gratitude for what both have done to me. I have vowed to devote my whole life only for the sake of martial arts. Nothing else matters to me. I would throw away any woman and risk my own life for the betterment of my art. It is the only thing important to me, Kojima declared with a hot, passionate speech that made all who were listening to acknowledge his great drive and dedication for his art. Nameless didn't felt like that, however, and couldn't help from smirking mirthlessly with a hollow laugh. I feel pity for you. To live your whole life without knowing love, to throw away the kindness of any woman for the cruel and uncaring hold that the quest for the perfection of your art has over you. It is a sad thing indeed. Kojima didn't take kindly Nameless comments. A burning rage began to rise inside of him. Shut up. What do you know? It is because of perfected my art that I'm alive here today. It is because of that drive for perfection that I'm able to defeat you despite your strange powers. All of it been achieved by myself with my own power. He raged, raising and closing his fist strongly in front of him. And that is why I feel pity for you. Nameless replied back passionately. You, who have nothing greater than you to fight for, would never be able to surpass my own drive for victory. Nameless stated as he tried to stand up back again, despite the almost disabled state of his body, to the surprise of all. For I do not fight only for myself, but for the sake of the one who I hold dear the most, and it is because of her that I will never give up no matter what odds are staked against me. He continued to speak as he kept rising up once more, his body shaking like crazy as he forced it to move by sheer will alone. I will never back down. I will never accept defeat. For her sake, I will walk any distance. I will challenge any enemy and face any danger. I will brave the highest of mountains and the deepest pits of hell. I will not fail in my mission. If it is for her, I will wrestle victory from the jaws of defeat no matter how. Her life depends on the success of my quest. And unlike you, I am never alone. She's always there with me, guiding me through every step I take. On every trial I overcome, she's there to catch me in case I fall and to lift me back again on my feet when I feel my strength leaving me. Nameless stated with such a strong conviction as he fully regained the control of his body. Flames began to envelope him and burn high all around him, as if mirroring the strength of his conviction. A crimson light that began to shine so brightly that it began to hurt to those who tried to look at it directly. And for that reason, you will never be able to defeat me. For the love of Isolde makes me invincible, he declared, his flames bursting on all directions, engulfing everything on their path. Kojima gritted his teeth with an unreadable expression. Foolishness, he declared before he launched himself towards Nameless, intending to end this combat already. But the young clone was being driven by a force much greater than himself. Fire kept pouring from out of his body. He slammed his left hand into the floor, making an enormous pillar of fire to rise from the ground. The burning vortex rose up into the heavens and spread throughout the field, making everybody near the spot to jump away from the raging fire, lest they risked being consumed by the flames. Kojima tried to brace himself against the flames, but the great power behind it was too much for him to bear. The pillar of fire kept scorching the entire place before splitting through the middle and revealing the image of what would one believe to be at first glance the spirit of a young woman that was embracing Nameless lovingly from behind, before she let go of him and rose into the air like an angel, before letting out such a mournful and painful wail that shook the souls of all the listeners to the core. All the while, Nameless was screaming the name of his beloved. Isolde. Finally, all the energy he was pushing out exploded in a fiery storm that burned the entire field one last time before going out, the image of the ghostly woman disappearing alongside the fading flames, leaving only Nameless barely standing in the middle of a scorched field. The burned body of Kojima Satomi soon fell and impacted upon the blackened earth, the eye patch-wearing young man completely out for the count, smoking from all of his multiple wounds. Seishu Katame Shudu Higi Rinkou. Mills Lane approached to assess the condition of both fighters before giving his verdict. The fact that Nameless was the only one still on his feet, Al thought barely, made that decision pretty obvious. He's out. The winner of this match is the blue-haired fellow that can set the sky on fire. Kojima Satomi vs Nameless. Nameless wins KO. All the audience witnessing the fight, whether present in the field or watching through the live feed, were left utterly jaw-slacked by what Nameless had just done. In Kanto, most of the females present had their eyes brimming with tears, their hearts moved by Nameless' plead for his loved one. In the Marizata residence, the three goddesses were also touched by the devotion of the young clone to the woman he loved. All around the world, women watching the feed couldn't help but feel their hearts ache for Nameless. Back in the construction site, Pan-own followers were still reeling at this new development. "What the fuck did I just saw?" asked a totally gobsmacked Yuri. "Was there a ghost girl coming out from the middle of the flames?" she asked, a little creeped out, since the implications she could come up with to explain this new phenomenon were not pleasant in the least. "I'm scared." "Me too," said two equally frightened Chikage and Kula. As they were still pretty young, they were easily scared when faced by supernatural phenomena like ghosts. Diana began to hug them both in order to reassure them. Shush, it's okay little ones. Nothing bad will happen to any of you as long as I'm here," she said tenderly. Pan, however, was sporting a deep frown, seemingly caught in her own thoughts. Her secretaries at her sides easily took notice of that. "What are you thinking, mistress?" asked Vice in a polite tone. Pan acknowledged her by tilting her head a little towards her. "I'm thinking I should take a closer look to the state of Nameless' girlfriend and redouble my efforts in searching a cure for her condition. Anyway, let's focus in the still-going fights for the moment," she said, changing the focus of attention back to the still remaining battles. Angel was standing back up again from where she had dived into the ground to brace herself against the firestorm, a look of annoyance on her face. "Great. First the entire place is frozen stiff and now everything is burned to a crisp. When am I going to be able to finish my fight in peace?" she complained with a tantrum. Iori, who was close enough to hear her, simply scoffed at her whining. "Why do you waste time lamenting over nothing? You should look at the bright side. Now that we are the only ones left, there's nothing standing between us and our praise," the red-headed stated. looking at a crawling Ryoto that was climbing back into his wheelchair with a dark evil expression. That statement seemed to cheer Angel up. "Oh, yeah, I think you're right," she said, giving her own creeping smirk as she glanced over a soot-covered Remy that was getting herself off the ground. The Lolita-dressed girl took notice of the degenerate stare that Angel was giving her. "Why are you looking at Remy like that?" she said with a failing voice. Angel began to crack her knuckles as answer. "I think it's time to resume our game," she said in a tone that promised pain. Angel versus Remy. Cocoron. Angel translocated herself to appear right in front of Remy in a blink and delivered a quick uppercut that lifted the smaller blonde of her feet. Crown under sky. As Remy began to fall back on the ground, Angel intercepted her with a haymaker that sent her away several yards into the dirt. Full moon evening. The blonde was left skidding through the ground eating earth as Angel's punch blew her the fuck off. She ended rolling into a crouch before spitting dirt and blood from her mouth. "Ack, Remy has had enough of you. You've been making fun of Remy for too long now. It's time for Remy to make you pay. Remy will show you the true reaches of her speed," Remy declared before she managed to stood up and began to run around the place, gaining momentum despite her injuries, her speed rising with each passing second as her body began to feel better once she was in her element. Angel just scoffed at her after her declaration. "Please, girl, didn't you try this kind of approach already? We all know who is the faster of the two," she mockingly said, goading Remy while the smaller blonde was running around the place. Said blonde wasn't in the mood for the beautiful Latina's comments. "That was nothing. Remy was simply caught off guard because she underestimated you, but now Remy will take you seriously and show you what she can truly do," she stated before she began to run even faster and faster, until finally, turning in the direction of Angel, she disappeared in a burst of speed, kicking off a cloud of dust. Genya no Sabama. The people watching the fight through the live feed were utterly surprised to discover Remy was so fast that she could appear to be invisible to the naked eye, but not so much for the rest of the veteran fighters and grandmasters present on the construction site, though they agreed she deserved praises for having reached such level of skill already. Even Angel raised her eyebrows and let out a whistle in appreciation. "Not bad, kitty cat, not bad at all," Angel said. Before she had to move her head to a side to avoid a devastating kick from smashing into her face, she didn't stop there as she suddenly found herself under a barrage of kicks trying to pummel her from all directions. Angel showed her own impressive and superior speed by evading every single one of them effortlessly. Happo Kitsutsuki Rekyaku. Remy was not pleased to see her attack being avoided with such ease. "This can't be possible. How can you avoid every single one of Remy's attacks?" the Lolita girl asked in bafflement, her frustration rising with each one of her kicks being evaded. Angel replied to Remy's question by sweeping her hand towards her face. The smaller blonde avoided the hit by jumping backwards. She was about to let out a sigh of relief for having narrowly avoided the attack, when she caught sight of both of her ribbons being clutched in Angel's hand. Remy brought both of her hands to the sides of her head to find them indeed missing and took notice of her now loose hairstyle, her hair falling freely from her sides. A sense of dread began to grow inside of Remy's guts. She hadn't even been aware when Angel had plucked her ribbons from her hair. "Wah, what?" Angel was merely staring at her with an impish grin. "The answer is quite simply, my dear, there's just that much of a gap between our skills. In other words, my speed is much superior compared to yours," she said in a sweet but with an unmistakable hint of arrogance. That statement simply made Remy's anger to rise more. "Impossible. No one is faster than Remy. Her speed is unmatchable. There's none alive able to surpass her," the blonde girl exclaimed in frantic denial, obviously her mental health beginning to deteriorate when faced with the notion that she was not the best in her specialized department. "Arrogant little thing, aren't you?" Angel replied in an amused, mocking tone. Remy just glared at her hatefully. "Shut up. I'll show you why no one is faster than Remy," she declared before starting to run once again. Her speed reaching levels not showed before as she kept increasing her acceleration. Her golden shoes were kicked off away and her speed rose drastically as result. She lunged at Angel with a blindly fast punch, again going so fast that she seemed to disappear, intending of ending her match with a single hit. Genya no Sabama. Which is why the little blonde was left utterly flabbergasted when Angel caught her punch without budging a single inch. WHAMMMMMMMMMM. The shockwave and air pressure displaced by their clash resounded heavily through the construction site, rattling the entire place up. Remy could only witness helplessly with mounting dread how Angel kept her fist trapped tightly on place with a sardonic grin. "It's just not possible." Angel grin never left her face as she increased the pressure over Remy's fist, causing the smaller blonde to get down on her knees in pain. "You just don't get it, do you, little girl? You are nowhere near from being a match to me," she stated matter-of-factly before connecting her knee in Remy's stomach and sending the smaller blonde flying away several dozen yards before landing roughly on the ground. The girl clutched her stomach in pain as she managed to assume a sitting position. She did a little spit take before speaking. "This is not yet over," she declared, but before she could try to get back up again, the burned, broken and bloodied form of Ryoto Asamiya crashed right in front of her. URK, Ryoto Sama. Fall of Yami Round 2 Part 4. A few minutes ago, Iori Yagami vs Ryoto Asamiya. As the two combatants got ready to resume their battle, Ryoto couldn't ignore a feeling of apprehension that was gnawing him on the inside. Seeing Iori with his ominous purple flames burning inside his eyes did nothing to reassure him. "Let us end this," Iori said, before he lunged at Ryoto with a fast combination of clawed strikes. As the wheelchair-ridden fighter was not able to dodge attacks well due to his condition, he became hard-pressed to block Iori's attacks. After parrying one particularly vicious swipe, Ryoto was able to counteract with a demolishing strike right in the middle of Iori's chest, the strength of the blow causing a loud thunderclap. Shintuke. The powerful strike was enough to make Iori reel, leaving him open to further attacks. "You're mine now," Ryoto declared with a confident smirk before he unleashed his devastating Gungar technique once more upon the helpless Iori. The rapid and powerful palm strikes began to rain down upon the red-headed fighter with the strength of a piston. Ryoto thought he had a good advantage as Iori did nothing to fight back, until he catched him by the wrist on a single movement and began to crush his articulation using his immense strength. Fingers that could pierce rock began to dig into Ryoto's flesh as his bones began to crack under the pressure. The white-haired young man couldn't stop himself from moaning in pain. How is it that you can shrug off my attacks so easily? They are strong enough to break through concrete." Ryoto managed to ask despite still struggling against the pain, completely astounded by Iori's fortitude. The red-haired flame wielder simply smirked at his opponent's question. "It is because of the blood of the Orochi inside my veins that I'm able to ignore your feeble attacks. All who are descendants of the Orochi are blessed with increased vitality and strength, allowing them to survive and even ignore attacks that would outright kill any other person. We also have increased regeneration that allows us to recover from even the most grievous of wounds in matter of days. Compared to that, it only takes me a few minutes to heal from these small cuts and bruises that you've given me," Iori stated with no small arrogance. Ryoto could only curse to his insides, as it was clear his opponent was beyond most mortals. Iori resumed his attack, still trapping his opponent's fist, by swiping a clawed strike at him with his free hand that gave the wheelchair-bounded fighter a nasty bleeding gash across his chest before he tossed his opponent away from him through several yards. Ryoto landed painfully on the ground. Iori pressed on his advantage by launching a quick 108 Shiki, Yamiburai, the purple flame traveling the distance separating both combatants in an instant and striking Ryoto in full while he was still on the ground, burning him painfully. The gray-haired fighter tried to push himself off the ground with his arms, but Iori pounced at him, reaching him in a moment with a leap and fell on top of Ryoto, grabbing him by the head and pushing him into the ground, keeping him down. He then rose up, spinning high into the air in a helicopter motion, leaving a trail of fire behind him while dragging Ryoto along with him and in the end, tossing the crippled boy away like trash. Ura 311. Shiki Oritsum Kushi. Meanwhile, as the battle raged on the construction site, in a higher plane of existence, inside the mainframe were the goddesses in charge of the maintenance of the heavenly supercomputer Yggdrasil that makes sure every single aspect of the universe is kept in balance on the Milky Way. We found Kirth slacking on her post reading one of the many romance mangas she has acquired on her previous visits to Earth while the rest of her underlings carry on with their usual readings and calculations. One of them, a perky, bubbly and usually klutzy blonde goddess named Chrono, suddenly stopped on her work and called out towards her fellow bridge bunnies and the goddess of love supposedly in charge. "Hey girls, check this out. Something seems to be happening down on Earth," she said, drawing the attention of her co-workers Aaron X. "What do you mean by that, Chrono?" asked Pierth, briefly looking away from her manga to take a glance at the younger goddess. "Well, I was running my usual analysis on the Yggdrasil, when I decided to take a peek on how things were going down on Earth," the admin goddess began to explain. "You mean hacking on the humans' TV signals again?" X commented offhandedly, causing Air to giggle and Pierth to smirk, knowing exactly what the youngest of the bridge bunnies tended to do when she was feeling bored. Chrono blushed in embarrassment as result. Anyway, as I was saying," the blonde goddess cleared her throat, trying to get matters back on track. "I took a look on how things were going on Earth, when I discovered most of the planet's communications are transmitting the same signal." That last bit caught the attention of the brunette goddess in charge. "What? Well, that is interesting. All right, put it on the main screen. Let's see what all the fuss is about," she said, closing her manga and taking a comfortable position on her seat. Just when a giant whole screen suddenly appeared above the control center, the leader of the Valkyries, Lind, suddenly walked inside the bridge. "Pierth, what are you doing? Are you slacking on the job again?" the blue-haired god said, unamused, taking her hands to her hips. Pierth just waved at her fellow goddess unashamedly. "Ah, Lind, glad of you to drop by. We were just about to see what the humans were up to down on Earth." Lind opened her mouth to scold her irresponsible fellow goddess, but she was interrupted by the ear-deafening impact of Iori's Shiki Oritsum Kushi, taking her attention away from Pierth and towards the desperate battle going down on Earth and now being shown in the heavens themselves. It was now then when Ryoto crashed in a broken heap at the feet of a prone Rimi, Iori inadvertently having put too much force on his throw. The Lolita-dressed girl was left pretty alarmed at seeing the condition her paramour was left. "Ryoto-sama." She immediately forgot all about her own fight and crawled towards the mangled form of the gray-haired boy to check up on him. "Who did this to you, Ryoto-sama?" she asked in distress, fretting over him. A cruel laugh drew her attention towards the direction of Iori, Ryoto's opponent, who was displaying a morbid joy from the pain he had inflicted upon the disabled young man. For all his boasting, he was just an insect and was squashed as such. Those words made Rimi to glare at him with unrestrained hate. "You, how dare you do this to Ryoto-sama? Rimi will destroy you for what you did to him," she declared before getting back on her feet and about to rush at him, when Angel appeared right in front of her, blocking her path. "Whoa, where do you think you're going, kitty cat? We still haven't finished with our fight," the white-haired Latina said, smirking impishly at the smaller blonde. Rimi just sneered back at her, stopping in her tracks. "You dare stand in Rimi's way? Rimi's had enough of you. She will make sure to destroy the both of you. She will kill you too, even if it is the last thing she does," she declared in a fit of rage. Angel snorted at her little tantrum, unimpressed. After all, she has been spewing such threats through all their battle, but Angel doesn't give them much importance, since the smaller blonde was too weak compared to her to carry them through. But Rimi showed that something was different about her threats this time around. She began to focus her ki as her rage fueled her strength. The air around her becoming polluted by the two different energy signatures she was channeling inside her body, making them to be seen easily even to the eyes of those without the ability to use ki. The two energies were total opposites of each other. One was clear and pure, the other dark and corrupted. The body of Rimi began to turn into a repository where the two energy mixed together, and as a result, the earth around her began to tremble due to the power she was releasing. The air itself was being charged with energy, sparks crackling wildly from time to time as a result. This made Angel's and Iori's demony hours to turn serious, as they could clearly feel the great power that was being channeled by the blonde. "What the hell is this girl doing? What is this power that I feel?" Angel asked in thought with a slight apprehension. It seems she will have to take the girl seriously and take her out immediately. The great amount of power being released caused Ryoto to awaken and turn towards Rimi despite his wounds. "Rimi, what are you doing? Don't tell me you're going to use that technique. Don't be foolish. You will only end up hurting yourself," he called towards her fellow disciple in distress, truly concerned about the girl's health. Do not worry about Rimi, Ryoto-sama. She will not fail in punishing those who have humiliated us, she said in a distorted voice, as the great amount of energy she had gathered gave her expression an evil wicked look. She faced towards their opponents and began to charge her attack. RGH. SEIDOUGOUI. Rimi then launched herself at her enemies, disappearing from all sight. Angel could only open her eyes in surprise before she had to put her arms in front of her to block a kick from the smaller blonde, the impact being so strong that it sent the white-haired Latina flying away. "This I didn't see it coming," was all that ran through Angel's head mid-flight before she was intercepted by Rimi and sent careening into a nearby concrete dumper with a kick. The Lolita-dressed girl immediately changed sights and pounced towards Iori. Yagami was able to brace himself for the attack just in time, as Rimi's fist connected with his guard. The force of the impact shaking the ground around them and cracking it a little, the thunderclap released was almost deafening as the air around them was violently displaced in an instant with such force that it would have struck away a normal human being. Rimi wasn't deterred on her attack, however, as she began to push forward trying to break through Iori's defenses. But the red-haired flame wielder didn't simply remain idle either, as he began to call upon the power of his cursed blood to counteract the younger blonde attack. His eyes began to burn with a piercing red flame as purple flames began to envelope his body. Despite the harm that the flames began to inflict on her, Rimi didn't falter even a little in her assault. But the power of the Orochi was just beginning to wake up fully, and it is not something that a mere mortal is able to defeat that easily. Iori began to push back at the blonde, and both engaged in a brief battle of wills. But despite her newfound power, Rimi was clearly being slowly but steadily overpowered. From the corner of his eye, Iori was able to see Angel leaping out from the wreckage of the former concrete dumpster, rubbing the back of her head as to nurse whatever bump she must have got from the violent crash. Iori called towards her. "Angel, would you mind if we switch partners for a bit?" he asked with grave voice. Angel just waved at him unconcerned, her attention focused on still clearing her head instead. "Sure, cough, knock yourself out. I need some time to get myself back in order after that hit," she said, supporting herself on her knees and coughing some dust off. The people watching from the sidelines were caught by surprise by this new development. Can they actually do that? Switch their opponents? Is that even allowed? Whip inquired towards the gathered warriors on her right. "Well, we never stipulated it was forbidden, so," Foxy replied with a shrug. Pan's response was to simply address the referee. "Mr. Lane, what is your verdict about this?" The senior referee took a moment to consider his answer. "I'll allow it," he finally declared. "Iori Yagami, Angel vs Ryoto Asamiya, Rimi Kokoron." That answer made Iori smirk. "Much obliged," he replied evenly, before unleashing his signature move again, the Kin 1211, Shiki Yautome, also known colloquially as the Maiden Masher. The slashes and clawed strikes rained down on the blonde girl, cutting her painfully and making her blood rain down all over the place. Just when it seemed Iori had finished his technique, he pulled out something else. After he ended his attack with his usual grab of his opponent before blasting them away with a small explosion of fire, he then intercepted the Lolita girl in midair before she fell with two long sharp slashes before releasing one big purple flame from the ground that rose up like a pillar of fire and struck the smaller blonde in full, blowing her away. "Ura 316, Shiki Seika. Rimi," screamed Ryoto in distress after seeing his fellow disciple being savagely beaten. Thanks to the power granted by the Seto Gui, Rimi got back on her feet promptly despite the heavy gashes and injuries she now sported and were bleeding. She spat a wad of blood to the side, ignoring all pain. "You will need more than that if you want to defeat Rimi," the girl declared before rushing back at Iori. She clashed with the red-headed head-on and both were immediately engaged in a brutal vicious fight. "No, Rimi, wait," Ryoto called, trying to reach the girl overcome by rage, but he had more pressing immediate matters to attend to, as a shadow fell over him. He turned to look behind him and found Angel looking at him with a deceptively sweet smile. "I think you should be worried more about your own skin, boyo. Since Iori and the kitty cat are busy having fun, That means you and I are going to have some time to play together," she said with a grin. Ryoto felt a heavy feeling of dread crawling up his spine. He couldn't help but gulp. Wham! He was sent skidding through several yards as Angel kicked him away through the sight. The white-haired woman then teleported to his position as he was still groaning from the hard impact. She began to teleport all around him, looking above him with a mischievous expectant demi-hour, like a predator enjoying seeing his prey squirm before pouncing on him. "Hope you're ready for this, boy. 'Cause, if you taste the Angel's extraordinary skills." Angel spoke, while making poses before slowly and elaborately dropping herself on the helpless boy with her elbow. She slammed on top of Ryoto, crushing the base of his spine with her elbow. The impact of the attack being so powerful that it broke the earth underneath the gray-haired fighter's body, leaving cracks in the shape of a spiderweb all around him. To all the people watching the fight, the attack looked rather painful, and indeed, it was. Survivor's banquet. Ryoto's screams of agony made Rimi to draw her attention away from the fight while she was once again locked in a contest of wills with Iori. "Ryoto-sama," said the blonde girl in distress, turning her head away from her opponent, which made her unable to see the wicked look and the cruel smirk that fell upon Iori's face. "You should not take your attention away from your opponent," he declared before cupping his right hand above a small flame. He began to charge in his other hand, and unleashed a barrage of flame pillars that traveled forward toward the ground, hitting everything in their path. The flames struck Rimi several times and enveloped her entirely like a purple cloak. For a moment she found herself unable to move as the pain caused by the flames left her totally helpless to any follow-up. Wine cups. Iori continued with his attack by running towards Rimi and delivering more clawed strikes, ending his attack by tapping even more into the power of the Orochi. His eyes began to shine in red and he let out a roar before he pounced on Rimi, grabbing the smaller girl by her face with both hands before lifting her up into the air. Iori smirked pretty wickedly in anticipation as he laughed like a maniac. "Shine," he said, before unleashing a massive explosion that created a gigantic pillar of fire that rose into the heavens, enveloping them both in a purple so bright that it was almost white. Everything close enough to the pillar was simply scorched by the bright light. Ura 1029, Shiki Homurabotogi. In the end, the body of Rimi struck the ground hard, broken, smoking and covered in burns. The girl writhed in the ground pitifully, undergoing an incredible pain. Despite her sorry state, the girl tried to get back to the fight, but her wounds were too severe to allow her to do that. She was left making gurgling noises as her body failed her. Iori too was left smoking from his own attack, as it seemed his own flames had caused him harm. But unlike his opponent, he was reveling in his own pain, taking a wild unrestrained posture with a scary deranged look on his face as his eyes shone in an ominous crimson. Ryoto was too, enduring a terrible pain after receiving Angel's attack, but the sounds of a Rimi about to collapse forced him to ignore his own injuries. "Rimi," the blonde ignored his pleas and kept trying to get back on her feet. "Rimi, stop. If you keep using the Seto Gui like that, the strain will eventually be too much for your body to take. It will kill you." Rimi finally was able to wobbly get back to her feet. She replied to Ryoto's concerns without turning to look at him, keeping her sight on Iori at all times. "Rimi appreciates your concern for her, Ryoto-sama, but even if it is you who is asking, I'm afraid Rimi can't obey that instruction. She can't let these two go unpunished after they hurt Ryoto-sama. Only when the transgression they have committed against Ryoto-sama is repaid with their own blood will Rimi finally stop," she stated, all too serious. Why Rimi? Why do you risk your life for my sake?" Ryoto asked, still lying on the ground. Rimi's stare turned far away. Ryoto was able to tell even if he was looking her from behind. Because Ryoto-sama is a very important person to Rimi, Rimi will do whatever it takes to please Ryoto-sama if and make him happy. No matter how much Rimi gets hurt as result. She said with utmost seriousness. "I don't understand, Rimi, why? Why are you willing to do all that for me?" Ryoto asked with honest confusion. Rimi still didn't dare to meet his gaze. Because Rimi loves Ryoto-sama with all her heart. She has loved him for a long time now. Always hoping that maybe one day he would feel for her the same way that she feels for him, but Rimi knows it is just a foolish hope at best. She's well aware that Ryoto-sama only has eyes for another woman and will never look at Rimi the same way he looks at her. But despite that, Rimi will continue adoring Ryoto-sama and try her best to not disappoint him. So that's why Rimi will not back up from this fight. She will keep fighting until all the enemies of Ryoto-sama are destroyed. She stated with a strong conviction, tossing a harsh glare towards the two followers of Pan. And with that the blonde girl lunged at Iori once more. The red-headed fighter was not moved by the display of emotions however. What a beautiful declaration, faux love. Too bad it will not help you to win this fight, he said mockingly before rushing to meet Rimi head-on. Both combatants clashed. Rimi smashed her fist on Iori's face at supersonic speeds, but the otherworldly strength of the Orochi allowed him to shrug off the hit unconcerned. He buried his own fist in Rimi's abdomen as retaliation, not even displaying the smallest hint of discomfort from Rimi's attack. The two kept pounding at each other with wild abandon, the shockwaves of their impacts clapping loudly throughout the field. Fists rained upon them both with impressive strength, but neither of the two bulged an inch from their attacks. It was during this heat of the moment that Rimi suddenly and abruptly stopped in her tracks and spat a smudge of saliva mixed with blood before her body locked up and began to spasm uncontrollably. Rimi! Ryoto yelled after her. Even Iori was caught by surprise by this new development and backed a little from the now spasming girl on the ground. Blura, wa, rrrrgh, what is happening to me? She managed to say with great difficulty through her convulsions. It's the Seto Gui. Your body must no longer be able to hold the strain. Let go of the technique now before it causes you irreparable damage. Ryoto yelled at her in distress, worrying greatly for her health. The Lolita girl replied while spitting a wad of blood, face down on the ground. Do not worry about Rimi, Ryoto-sama. She will be fine, you just wait for her to finish dealing with those who have hurt us, she said, turning her head at him to give him an adoring look and a sweet smile. Her tender moment was interrupted by the ominous shadow that fell over her. She turned to find Iori towering over her with an unforgiving stare. You should not make idle boasts about things that are beyond your skills to accomplish, he said in a cold, uncaring voice. Rimi glared at him with all the hate she could muster. It is not an idle boast. Rimi will never give up until she gets her revenge on you and that other woman. Iori just replied with an amused chuckle at that statement. I seriously doubt it. Say good night, he stated before lifting up one of his legs and bringing his foot down harshly right upon Rimi's head, impacting her cranium on the ground with thunderous force and busting her head open with such a strength that cracked the ground around the impact zone and created a crater where Rimi was left half buried. Iori pulled his leg away, his shoes in the hem of his pants soaked in the blonde girl's blood. The girl herself didn't get back up anymore after that. No, Ryoto screamed in despair, and that's when he began to see red. Even some of the most hardcore fighters watching from the sidelines winced at the sight of the punishment that the blonde girl had received. Mills Lane flinched from where he was standing, seeing the damage that Iori had caused. Dear God, even I can see from here that girl ain't getting back up again. Rimi Kokoron KO. Angel grimaced a little while appraising Iori's handiwork. Damn, she turned to look at the red-headed figure. And you say you hate violence? She asked in mild disbelief. Iori replied with a stoic expression. Yes, I do hate violence since it brings all of my worst traits to the surface. Deep down I know I'm a bloodthirsty sick bastard who gets his kicks from causing pain to other people, so I hate fighting for making me show my true self to the world, and I hate myself for being like this since this bloodlust inside of me was not my choice, he remarked, looking at his hand harshly before closing his fist so hard to make the bones of his knuckles pop loudly. Angel raised an eyebrow and gave Iori a strange look. You got issues, Iori simply snorted at the white-haired woman comment. Don't I know it? People around the world were looking horrified at the savage violence that the red-haired figure was able to unleash. In Kanto, Kenichi and company were paralyzed after witnessing the horrible beating brought upon Rimi. Hakufu and Miu were embracing and trying to reassure little Hinoka, who was crouched in the ground covering her eyes, as the little girl's sensitivities could not withstand the horrible violence happening in front of her. The fighters from the Kanto schools were equally shocked at the brutality of the fight since they had never witnessed so much bloodlust before. In the temple where the Norns resided, Skuld could not keep looking at the slaughter and turned her gaze away. Belldandy was the most horrified of the three due to her kind nature. Keiichi was trying hard to reassure her. Even Erd, who was the brazen of the sisters, was taken aback by the brutality of it all. In heaven, the entire control center was speechless, none of the goddesses having expected this level of violence and brutality to be going on Earth when they decided to watch the mysterious signal on the main screen. The only one who was not shocked by the battle was Lind, who instead had a look of utmost concentration and had her attention fully focused on the screen, taking notice of every single little detail of the battle raging on. Unknown to the rest of the goddess but her, a rising flame began to burn inside her heart. The call for combat was beginning to search for Lind. Back on the fight, Ryoto's anger was reaching new levels. In his rage, a dark aura began to emanate from his writhing body before he began to channel a second type of energy opposite to the dark one. He was beginning to move beyond his own limits in order to forcefully master the Seto Gui. Ah! With a mighty heave that made the earth shake, the gray-haired fighter stood up, his legs regaining their motion and strength, and Ryoto found himself able to walk again. Angel was only mild surprised by this new development. "You can do that weird technique too," she stated with a raised eyebrow. Iori simply limited himself to make an observation with an unfazed expression. "So, you're able to walk again. Things are sure to turn quite interesting." Ryoto looked at Iori with a grim stare. "Indeed, the last time I used this technique my body was unable to deal with the strain and it ended up crippling me. But you forced me to attempt to master it in a hurry, and now that I have complete control of this technique I have fixed the damage it had done to my body and I'm able to move my legs again. I would thank you for having given me the drive to master the Seto Gui, but since you brutally hurt Rimi, I will have to break your face instead," he stated with a pop of his neck before launching himself towards Iori and disappearing from all sight. Ryoto reapered right above the red-haired fighter and was about to drive his fist off his head, when a leg connected to the side of his face and sent him crashing several yards away into the ground. Angel landed on her feet carefree. She had been the one that intercepted Ryoto and saved Iori from getting punched, not that the flame wielder would appreciate it. She addressed the gray-haired fighter, who rose immediately from where she had sent him to take a dive and gave her a cold look, a small bruise on his cheek. "Now wait a minute, boyo. You and I aren't done yet. Iori here has already had his fight, but I myself still not done yet. If you want to face Iori and avenge your girlfriend, you'll have to go through me first," she stated with a devilish sneer. Ryoto just spat a wad of saliva mixed with blood to aside his response. "Fine," he said before he disappeared again. Angel was simply grinning before she teleported away as a fist embedded itself in the ground on where she was just standing a second ago. Ryoto pulled his fist from where it had been buried in the ground and looked to where the white-haired beauty was now, several yards further away. Angel began to chastise him in a playful tone. You will not be able to hit me that easily with that technique this time. The only reason why Kitty was able to land a hit on me was because it had caught me by surprise how much that technique had improved her physical prowess in an instant, but now that I know what to expect I will not be caught at a disadvantage a second time. And besides, even with your abilities augmented by that technique, you are still not as fast as her, meaning you're nowhere near my own speed," she stated, assuming a combat stance. Ryoto just wiped the spot where he was hit. "We'll see," he said before disappearing once more. Angel just grinned as response. "Yes we will," she said before she translocated away and disappeared. The two combatants were suddenly engaged in a high-speed battle, their movements too fast to be followed by normal human eyes. The only thing that could be seen were the shockwaves and the thunderclaps of their punches. The entire field began to be covered by the craters that their impacts created, making it seem as if they appeared out of nowhere and turning the entire field into a veritable war zone. While the two fighters were busy breaking the place apart, Iori turned his gaze towards the unconscious girl in the ground. He approached the unmoving body of Rimi and began to check her condition, realizing that she was not breathing and her heart rate had dropped dangerously low. He mused for a moment if he should do something about it or leave the girl to her fate. Normally, he doesn't tend to bother with fallen opponents. If they live or die is of no concern to him, as it is his belief that anyone stupid enough to defy him deserve whatever destiny that befalls them as result. But this situation is different, since it is not him who should decide the fate of this girl but the new master he now follows. It is Pan who has to decide what to do with this girl's life, and on that note, since he has now defeated her, her life now belongs to the warrior girl from another world, and it is she who should have the final word on what to do with the blonde girl lest she gets displeased with him. And he has been rather pleased to serve her to far. Already he can feel the results of her training bearing fruit, even though she has only been training him and the others for little more than a week, but her training methods proved to be highly demanding and Pan had been rather thorough. Also the promises of being instructed in very impressive key techniques and exercises that he had never considered possible before, are also a good incentive to remain under her service for the time being. Very well, it may put him in a good standing if he's able to show that he can guard over his boss' interests. With the matter settled, Iori raised one hand into the air, his index and middle fingers stretched forward pointing down. He is no healer, as his skill set revolves almost exclusively in ways to break people, not fix them. But as the last descendant of a once powerful clan and a consecrated martial arts that has fought in hundreds of bloody battles, he had to learn due to necessity to treat his own injuries in case he found himself without any kind of medical attention ready at hand. He brought his hand down on the girl and stabbed her with her fingers in a spot underneath her shoulder blades. Remy almost immediately woke up in a fit, gasping for air before she began to vomit blood. The wails of pain from the girl drew the attention of the recently crippled fighter. "What are you doing to Remy? Get away from her," Ryoto demanded in anger. He received a kick in the back of the head for his slip. "Eyes on the fight, boyo," Angel declared as she kicked him again and sent him flying away several yards. The white-haired human then rushed at him with her impressive speed and intercepted him with a long veritable barrage of kicks and elbow strikes that rained down on a helpless Ryoto, pummeling all over his body until he was punched away by a haymaker. Loyalty test for Liberalis. The newly awaked girl wasn't able to regain her focus promptly as the blow to the head had left her quite disoriented. It took a few moments for her senses to be able to break through her haze, but once she did, the first thing she noticed was her paramour getting the crap beaten out of him. She reacted accordingly. "Right, Ryoto-sama, you wench. Leave Ryoto-sama alone," Remy said and struggled to get back on her feet despite her pain. A futile effort, since she was no longer chainlizing the Seto-gui. Her body could no longer ignore all the injuries she had received and had succumbed already to the damage. The girl was only able to flinch in pain and barely shake her head to her sides, unable to lift even a single finger. My, what a stubborn pest you are. And here I was trying to keep you from kicking the bucket out of pity, shouldn't have even bothered." Iori drawled in a bored tone, catching Remy's attention. The lithe blonde tried her best to turn her head to look at Iori. It caused her incredible pain, but she was successful. Careful. You keep talking, I may forget the reason why I spared you life in the first place and end up killing you anyway," Iori said, grabbing the girl by the back of her head and lifted her up in the air without any concern for her well-being, the rough sudden movement making the girl cry out in pain. It again took the attention of Ryoto away from his fight as he was rising from the ground once again, ignoring all injury due to his Seto-gui. "Remy," the gray-haired fighter exclaimed. He was about to rush at Iori, but the red-haired fighter put the broken girl between him and Ryoto to keep the former cripple from doing something stupid. I wouldn't do that if I were you. We wouldn't want for your little girlfriend to receive any more serious injuries now, do we?" Iori chided condescendingly. He used one of his fingers to find the open wound in the smaller blonde's head and sink a long sharp nail deeply in it, making the girl to let out a horrible and distressing scream of agony to make his point across. Ryoto stopped cold in his tracks, an impotent look of rage on his face, knowing if he tried to do anything Remy's life would be in danger. "Do not worry about the girl, she is in good hands as long as you don't try anything foolish. Besides, you have a fight to finish with Angel, better get to it," Iori stated with an unmoving expression. Ryoto gritted his teeth helplessly, knowing he could do nothing to help the girl that had just declared her eternal adoration to him. Angel's comments from behind him changed the focus of his attention. "Come on, kiddo, don't get distracted now, nothing has changed about our situation. If you want to save your girlfriend and have a shot at Iori, you still have to go through me," Angel declared, assuming a combat stance. Ryoto could do nothing but curse inwardly at the great disadvantage he found himself in. He knew he had to deal with Angel first before going after Iori if he didn't want it to be attacked from behind, but he couldn't just leave Remy in the clutches of the vicious red hate fighter. So, what's it going to be, kiddo? Will you face Angel, or would you rather prefer I execute your girlfriend instead? Iori stated with a cruel smile as he strengthened his grasp over the girl, increasing the pressure on her skull so much that one could hear how the walls of her skull began to creak. The girl, unsurprisingly, screamed in despair at the unbearable pain she was under, horrifying a shocked audience that could do nothing but held its breath at the unrestrained brutality being displayed by the redhead. Ah, Ryoto-sama, Remy screamed with a soul-wrenching cry, openly weeping now as she was no longer able to withstand her suffering. Ryoto could do nothing but glance in hateful doubt between the smiling Angel and the tearful Remy. None of the fighters on the sidelines were making a sound due to the seriousness of the situation. Most of them were rather grim witnessing the unfolding drama. Others like Sagat or Pan were totally impassive and uncaring about the cruel show. But some like Kazuya or K9999 were openly smiling at the gruesome scene, enjoying the suffering that Iori was causing. For others like Dr. Jackal, it was hard to tell what his thoughts could be, as all he did was keeping his smiling face up without showing any other kind of expression. From among the lines of the Yami masters, however, some of the reactions were completely opposite. This is no honorable way to fight. To cowardly use hostages to hide behind. How can the girl Pan stand such honorless scum among her midst? Cyril Ramon exclaimed in affront, insulted by Iori's willingness of using a hostage. In his mind, that was an affront that shamed the true meaning of combat. Akira Hongo was of the same mindset. He was preparing to jump in the fight and intervene. I concur, we cannot leave our disciples to suffer such travesty. The dark-haired man said, barely containing himself. I agree with both of you. Let us not waste any more time and put an end to this transgression against martial arts. Agard Jumsai said with conviction before turning towards Ogata Ishinsai. What about you, Ogata? Care to join us in saving your disciples? The lilac-haired fighter just snorted in disdain. If they die in this battle is because they were not strong enough. They have made their choices, now they must endure the consequences. He simply stated and spoke no more. Jumsai scowled slightly at him before turning away and addressing back the other two grandmasters. Let's go, my friends. It seems it's up to us to save the disciples. The three grandmasters rushed forward and disappeared in a burst of great speed, but were suddenly intercepted by a beam of energy exploding and kicking a large cloud of dust in front of them just less than a dozen meters away from their original position, stopping them cold on their tracks. Once the dust dissipated, they were able to see Pan on the other side of the field with her arms half crossed as she had one of her hands pointing a finger at their direction. It didn't take a genius to know who was responsible for the attack. What are you three doing? I thought I had made clear I wouldn't tolerate any more interruptions. She stated in a plain voice. Pan, why do you stop us? Don't tell me you approve of this travesty. Cyril said in outrage. The commotion caught the attention of the red-haired fighter. Oh, this is rich. Don't tell me the all-terrible grandmasters of Yami want to save the lives of their helpless disciples. Iori mocked with a sneer. It made the three grandmasters to scowl at him. You have no right to speak, you damn coward. How you dare to take one of our disciples as hostages means to gain victory on this combat. Cyril retorted in anger. Hostage. Iori replied with amusement. I believe you are clearly mistaken. I am not using this weak girl as hostage to end this fight. On the contrary, I want this fight to keep going on. I want Cripple Boy to unleash all his strength against me and Angel without restraint to make things more entertaining for us. I'm just keeping the girl from interfering since it seems she still wants a go at Angel even after she has already lost. She also is a good incentive to make sure your disciple doesn't lose his focus, since he still has a fight to attend, but he rather seems to want to ditch my fellow fighter and go straight against me. Now don't misunderstand me, I wouldn't mind to break him myself, but I find that outcome not being particularly fair to Angel since I have already defeated this girl who was supposed to be her opponent. Wouldn't want to cheat her out of her fight after all, he finished with an arrogant smirk. The Yami grandmasters just gritted their teeth in impotent rage. You don't fool me, you soulless monster. Akira Hongo replied harshly. That is just an excuse for you to hide your true intentions and satiate your savage bloodlust. I won't forgive you for torturing our students with this uncalled and unnecessary cruelty. He stated in outrage. Iori just let out a cruel laugh as response. Oh, this is just too much. The terrible masters that follow the path of the killer dare to lecture me about morality. Well, let me tell you something then. He began to increase the pressure upon Rimi's skull, eliciting another stream of screams from the girl. This is how a true battle to the death is carried out, where there is no place for pity or mercy for the weak, only the will of the strong. If you are not able to deal with this, then maybe you chose wrong on what belief to follow, not my problem anyway. So spare us all your useless posturing and keep your mouth shut. Iori then turned towards Ryoto once more. Time's up, kiddo, so tell me, what it's going to be. Ryoto could simply not make a decision. He was probably in the worst instance possible and all he could do was grit his teeth in frustration. If he tried to attack Iori, he will without a doubt kill Rimi, and the other option was not acceptable either. He could not just abandon the girl to fight Angel and leave her to keep being tortured by the red-headed flame wielder. He kept exchanging glances between the tear and blood-soaked girl crying his name and the unforgiving harsh stare of the last member of Clan Yagami. Finally, after what it seemed a long internal debate that seemed to have taken an eternity to him, Ryoto snapped. Damn it all. He turned towards Iori. I give up. I give up. Just stop hurting Rimi. I won't fight anymore. Just let her go. Iori hadn't expected that answer and wasn't pleased the smallest bit by it if his hard frown was any indication. He huffed. HMMPH, so you chose the coward's way out. Sorry to disappoint you, kiddo. But this is not that kind of fight. Even if you get down on your knees and beg, neither I or Angel will stop hurting you and your little girlfriend. Have you forgotten what the conditions for this match were? Iori asked mockingly. Ryoto began to feel a sudden surge of dread swelling inside of him. Maybe we should ask the referee for clarification to refresh your memory. The red-headed flamewielder signaled towards Mills Lane. Tell us, referee, what were the conditions of victory for our fight? The senior referee began to reply with no small trepidation of his own. This is a no-hold-barred fight. That will not end until only one of the combatants is left standing. Most of the audience could at this point feel how the blood on their veins turned cold at the realization. Sorry, kiddo, but he's right. This fight will not end until one of you is unconscious, or dead, Mills Lane explained with a great deal of pity towards Ryoto. Iori laughed sadistically after crushing the hopes of the former cripple. See, boy, there's no easy way out of here. You either stand up on your feet and die like a real man, or we will give you a long tortuous beating and kill you like a dog. You know, you really disappoint me, kiddo. Here I thought you were a worthy opponent, and it turns out you're just a little weak scum. It pisses me off. I wanted to have a good fight, have a bit of fun by breaking a strong opponent. But now my only source of entertainment is gone because you've decided to throw the towel. There's no fun in breaking someone who has lost his will to fight. He again moved Rimi forward for all to see. Maybe we should get done with it all and kill this girl already. Maybe her screams will prove amusing enough for me, he said with such a cold resolution that it chilled the blood of all who were hearing. No one had any doubt that Iori would kill Rimi on the merest whim. The ashen-haired fighter mood seemed to deflate for a moment in despair, but then it got back up full of determination. Very well then, if that is the only way to end this fight, then let us get going with it already. I give my life in exchange for that of Rimi. You can cause whatever punishment you want to my own body to entertain yourself. So go ahead, do your worst. I'll endure whatever pain you wish to inflict upon me, just stop hurting Rimi. He declared with conviction. Iori tilted his head at a side and gave Ryoto a measuring look. You want to suffer whatever punishment we can dish out in exchange for this useless girl life. He let out a maniacal laugh. Now that is interesting. Very well, if that is your wish then, I'll let Angel here show you what our opinion about quitters is. He said, motioning with his free hands towards a grinning Angel who made a show about crackling her knuckles as she walked towards the formerly crippled young man. This is going to hurt you more than it's going to hurt me. Oh, who am I kidding? This will not hurt me at all. Angel exclaimed happily before she delivered a devastating haymaker right in the middle of Ryoto's face that lifted him up and spun him around in the air before he crashed painfully back in the ground. Once he was back kissing dirt, Angel began to viciously kick him in the ribs until he started to spat blood and then turned him around with a kick, leaving him with his back on the ground looking up at her, before she jumped and let herself fall atop of him with her knee crashing on his face. The sound of broken cartilage signaled his nose being broken. Ryoto grunted in pain and writhed in the ground, bringing his hands to cover his bleeding nose. He snapped out of it quickly and slowly and deliberately stood back up, looking Angel straight in the eyes all the way, leaving for all to see the stream of blood that flowed down from his nose staining his lips and chin. "It's that all you've got?" he replied in defiance. Angel smiled broadly once more. "Oh, this is going to be so much fun," she said before resuming the beating, going through every single technique and special attack she knew. Formalist Blue, Senseless Fists, Bye Bye Rogue, Rapun Kamui, Mad Murder Roulette, Red Sky of Japonesia, Citizen of the World, Shelter from Storm, Buggy and Coffin, With a Lamp for Pathway, Train to See Cherry Blossoms, Impotent Symptom, Crown Under Sky, Full Moon Evening, State of Heat Haze, Cosmic Feud and Swing, Lost Homeland, Loyalty Test for Liberalists, Survivor's Banquet, etc. In short, she made Ryoto go through the meat grinder. The entire affair quickly became a morbid and rather gruesome sight to behold. The only sounds being heard on the field were the thunderclaps from the air being displaced by each attack, the sounds of bones being broken and the cries of Ryoto desperately trying to endure through it all. Rimi began to cry again seeing the brutal beating Ryoto was receiving. "Ryoto-sama." She closed her eyes and tried to look away, but Iori didn't let her. He kept her head from turning sideways and forcefully made her keep watching by lifting her eyelids with his other free hand. "Ah, I will not let you turn your gaze away that easily. You will watch this until the bitter end. Take a good long look. This is the price of your own weakness. All this pain your boyfriend has to go through is your own fault because you were not strong enough to defend yourself and now he has to suffer in your stead. He must really love you. Just look at all he's willing to go through for your sake. It is an enlightening experience, don't you think? And you dare to scoff at his sacrifice by looking away. What an ungrateful little brat you are," Iori whispered on Rimi's ear, tears flooding down her cheeks at the sight of the man she loved being horribly injured. She could do nothing but take it all in full, whimpering in helplessness as she kept shedding tears of despair. After almost 20 minutes of what could be considered a savage inhumane beating, Ryoto was left bleeding and broken in the ground but still staring defiantly at his executioner despite all the torture he had to endure. If it wasn't because his Seto-gui was boosting his physical capabilities, he would have passed out a long time ago. "Have enough yet?" he spat through bloodied teeth. Angel just wiped her blood-stained knuckles off and nodded as reply. "Yeah, I'm done. I'm starting to get bored anyway. My bloodlust has already been satiated and I have worked all of my frustrations out of my system. I guess I should let Iori take over for me at this point," she said half musingly, turning her back at Ryoto before walking away from him as she made signals towards Iori that it was his turn to carve his pound of flesh out of the ashen-haired boy. "How very kind of you, I appreciate this gesture. Now I wouldn't want to impose but would you mind to hold this little brat for me while I go have my fun?" Iori said, motioning to the broken girl in his grasp. "Sure, no problem," was the chirpy reply. Iori simply tossed the smaller blonde towards the white-haired Latina as one would do with a piece of disposable trash, Angel catching the helpless girl fairly easily. He then began to walk towards the downed Ryoto with big menacing steps, his impressive height making him look increasingly bigger and terrifying the more he reduced the distance between his target. Rimi was beginning to suffer a mild case of schizophrenia as the pain of her own wounds, especially her head injury, and her heartache for seeing her loved one suffer started to addle her mind. Why is this happening? Why are you being so cruel to Ryoto-sama? This is too much, she whimpered pitifully through falling tears. Angel was not fazed by her pleading, she kept smiling as she began to hug Rimi and rub her cheeks as if she were a little child. Hush, kitty cat. There's no need to worry about your boyfriend, I'm sure Iori will be most careful while playing with him. Just stay put and keep quiet like a good little girl and enjoy the show, alright? We wouldn't want to distract Iori and make him injure your friend by accident, wouldn't we? No, no, the Yami masters who had been forced to witness the barbarity from the sidelines could no longer remain quiet. For God's sake, Pan, haven't you had enough? Are you going to let a helpless boy be murdered in front of the entire world? Akira Hongo called with boundless outrage. Pan simply replied by licking her front teeth carefree. I specifically stated that I would not interfere in the fights of my followers in any way whatsoever, unless asked directly, and even then it would be at my own discretion. Your students all agreed to the same terms as my minions for this battle, so I don't understand why you are all whining about it. If they're too weak to handle it, then they shouldn't have accepted to battle my people in the first place. So whether Iori kills your student or not, that is his prerogative. Out there in space things like this are pretty common, and this is just a small taste of how battles are carried out there. But I wouldn't worry about your student's life too much. I have been personally overseeing and taking a hand in the training of all my minions using my own methods. Though it's only been for a short time, I have already gained a fairly idea of what they are capable of. So I trust Iori will make the right decision regarding your student's fate, she said decisively, putting an end to the conversation. While they were speaking, Ryoto managed to rise back to his feet and glare defiantly at Iori to his eyes. He was not going to show fear in his presence. So kiddo, ready for the next round? Iori asked with a hint of malice. Ryoto didn't show any hesitation and replied bravely. Do your worst. Iori just chuckled in amusement. Believe me, I will, he said, before he slammed Ryoto's head violently into the ground, his fingers digging painfully into his skull in preparation for another Ura 311, Shiki Oritsum Kushi. Iori simply smiled as he hovered over his downed opponent like a predator about to go for the kill. Shine, was all that Ryoto heard, before his world exploded in pain. Boom! The following detonation of purple fire was strong enough to blow the hair backwards of all the people present on the construction site and blind anyone who was looking directly at the explosion. Unlike the normal version of this attack, Iori didn't let Ryoto be sent flying away by the force of the explosion. Once the dust dissipated, everyone could see how the two figures were still in the same positions, with Iori pinning Ryoto into the ground with his hands still digging into the ashen-haired fighter's skull. Iori didn't waste time to follow up with another explosion. Shine, boom, and then another, and another, and another, and another, and another. One after the other, Iori kept releasing explosions of fiery destruction right upon Ryoto's head. Each one burying the gray-haired young man, more and more into the ground, to the horrified stares of the people witnessing the fight. The live feed. People around the world could only stare in morbid disbelief at the terrible punishment that the red-headed flamewielder was inflicting upon the helpless Ryoto. By the time Iori was done, he had burned out his own clothes and singed his own body, leaving him only with his turtle shell and charbroiled pants. A much better condition than Ryoto's own, as his entire body had been completely charred by the flames. Iori lifted the broken martial artist into the air with the same arm he had been holding him all this time as a deranged look began to take over him. We are still not done, boy. Iori growled, his eyes shining red, before he slammed Ryoto back into the ground and began to strike him with a variant of the maiden masher, in which he stabbed him in the torso with his nails, riddling his entire bare chest with bleeding holes, before he slammed both of his arms on him for a last fiery explosion that propelled Ryoto briefly into the air. Iori finished his attack by dragging his fingers through the ground forwards and launching a violent swipe in a rising 180 arc in front of him that cut through the air and threw everything else in its path. In this case Ryoto, as he was intercepted by the attack while he was falling, slashing his flesh open and making blood rain down in a shower of crimson, leaving him with 5 long bleeding gashes running through his entire back. Kin 1218, Shiki Yatagarasu. Ryoto was left with deep wounds bleeding in the ground, moaning desperately in pain. A general feeling of dread fell upon the audience as they saw Iori was still not done. He approached towards Ryoto once more with deliberate steps and grabbed him by the neck with both hands, lifting him high above his own head. Everybody watching throughout the entire world held their breath in anxiousness, waiting for Iori's next move. This is the end, he declared, before slashing Ryoto's throat open by swiping his two hands at the same time down to his victim's chest in a cross pattern. He just let the poor boy fall into the dirt as he began to writhe in a pool of his own blood, taking his hands to his neck in an attempt to stem the tide of vital liquid. In Kanto, Kenichi let out a scream calling for his former friend from his childhood, worried desperately for his sake as all the gathered students could only stare in horrified disbelief at the massacre that had just occurred. Ryoto. In heaven, the entire control center was utterly shocked by the slaughter brought about by a single man, believing if the red-haired fighter must have been under demonic influence, for the power he wielded seemed quite unnatural. The only one that had not lost her bearing was Lind, who was still watching at the screen intently with stoic determination. Seeing the young gray-haired fighter willingly endure all that gruesome punishment made her respect him and consider him a worthy fellow warrior. She just couldn't understand why her fellow goddesses had such horrified looks on their faces. Couldn't they see and acknowledge his courage? Didn't they saw the heart of a true warrior beating inside his chest? In Niflheim they were also having their own reactions at the fight. Hild had been greatly amused by the savagery displayed by the redhead. My, quite the vicious fellow, isn't he? And so handsome too. Maybe I should take some vacations and pay another visit to Earth soon. I wasn't aware there were many interesting people inhabiting it as of late. What do you think, Haggle-chan? She said in a playful tone, turning towards someone to her right. The beautiful blonde woman in the red dress, standing next to the Daimokaicho, did not know how to respond. She didn't know humans could be capable of so much terrifying violence and bloodshed. She shuddered to think what her mistress could want by involving herself with people like that. Back to the construction site. Iori simply turned around and began to walk away, stopping after a few meters to address the wounded boy one more time. I must say I'm impressed at your courage for having endured all of my punishment. To have willingly submitted yourself to this torture in order to save another person, you have earned my respect. Do not worry about bleeding to death. I avoided slashing your jugular. You will live as long as you receive medical attention promptly. I hope you survive and become stronger. I would like to fight you again in the future, this time without any outside interference. He then turned towards Angel. Let's go, Angel. We are done here. Ryoto Asamiya KO. Iori Yagami. Angel vs Ryoto Asamiya. Rimi Kokuron Iori Yagami. Angel win. Brutality. As he walked past the white-haired woman holding the crying blonde girl in her arms, Rimi snapped at Iori with scorn for what he had done to Ryoto. You horrible monster. How could you do that to Ryoto-sama? Have you no heart? How could you be so cruel to him? She yelled in a fit of anger. Iori just gave her an odd look. Cruel? On the contrary, I'm being kind. I'm letting him live, am I not? If I had been cruel, I would have made sure that I had injured him heavily as to make him unable to move, and then I would have killed you in front of his eyes before finishing him off next. The fact I decided to spare both of your lives speaks volumes about my mercy, as very few people have walked alive away from me after challenging me to a fight, which is still a lot more mercy than what my father had with me when I was growing up. He said before keeping walking back towards Pan's lines and ignored the girl from that point forwards. Angel followed him suit, bringing Rimi along. Seeing the fight already over, Pan addressed her little robotic assistant in a dry tone. Giru, I want you to collect Ryoto and bring him here. Then treat him on his more serious injuries by applying the medical liquid used on the healing chamber directly into his wounds. It will be done, Pan. Giru. The little robot said before carrying out the orders of his owner. When Iori walked close to her, she only took a glance at him and said, You didn't kill him, that's good. But next time, try at least to leave your opponent good enough to be able to walk away on his own feet. I'm particularly not looking forward to having to spend my somewhat limited and very precious medical supplies on every single new recruit that joins our group. I'll try my best to control my urges. It's not so simple for me to keep my bloodlust down once I awake my Orochi's blood, but I'll do what I can. He said evenly. Pan just narrowed her eyes at him. We are going to increase your training once we are back at the headquarters and work at your control. We'll also have to speed up your learning curve to make you able to overcome your Orochi blood much sooner than I had expected. I don't want any outside influence manipulating my minions' decisions. she stated before taking her gaze away from him, signaling the end of the conversation. Iori nodded in reply before moving on. Once he went on to take his place among the other warriors, Kazuya turned at him with a big devilish grin on his face. I must say I'm impressed at the ruthlessness you showed when breaking those weaklings and the delicious vicious way in which you caused them pain. I look forward of working with you in the future, he said in amusement between evil chuckles. From behind Kazuya, Dr. Jackal was seen nodding in agreement. Iori just lifted an eyebrow as response. We'll see. Pan, seeing that all the fights had already concluded, called for the next set of matches to begin. All right, since everybody has already finished, let's start with the next fights. Who's next? Some masters from Yomi, particularly those from the weapons division, were openly gaping at the way that Pan casually dismissed the massacre that had just taken place. What? You mean right now, you're not going to even give us a few minutes to recover from the shock of the last battle? Rin Tachibana exclaimed, dumbfounded, surprised at the total indifference of the girl from outer space towards extreme violence. If you need some time to recover your frail sensibilities, then you're welcome to chicken out from the next set of fights if you want. Meanwhile, I'm going to push some more of my people up front and you can decide who is going to face who. Pan said, not giving a flying fuck about what Yami's opinion. She pointed behind her towards her more experienced fighters, most of them as equally vicious and ruthless like Iori. Many among the Yami masters felt a chill down their spines at seeing the maniacal evil grins on the faces of the fighters surrounding Pan. Kazuya, Dr. Jackal, Yuri, Foxy, Nina, Vice and Mature could barely wait for the next battles to begin. Fall of Yami Round 3. Pan was addressing her followers in preparation for the next fights. So, who of you wants to go first? It was Sagat who stepped forward, moving for the first time from his spot at the right behind Pan to face the gathered Yami Grandmasters. I'll go. I want to see if the rumors about these so-called Grandmasters are true, he said, walking to the front with slow measured steps that made a good show of his intimidating bulk and height until he was standing alone in the destroyed construction field. Make sure to take out your turtle shell like Balrog and Vega. Otherwise it will only get in your way for still not having completely getting used to the extra weight. Pan drawled unconcerned when Sagat walked past her. The one-eyed fighter did so without taking his gaze from looking forwards. The turtle shell crashed heavily on the ground, burying itself a little in the broken earth. So, who among you will have the courage of facing me in combat? Sagat asked towards the gathered Yami Grandmasters. Agard Jumsai blood ran high the moment he laid eyes upon the legendary Muay Thai master. He was still shaken by the beating incurred upon Ryoto, but having the patch-wearing fighter in front of him made him forget all about that in exchange for personal pursuits. It always has been one of my greatest dreams since I was a rookie, beginning his instruction on Muay Thai, to face Thailand's greatest national hero in battle. It would be a great honor if you allow me to be your opponent and test my Muay Thai skills against those of the legendary Emperor of Muay Thai. Sagat let a small smirk grace his lips. I've heard about you, Demon Emperor of the Underground, and how you killed all of the greatest masters of Muay Boran. It will be interesting to fight against you. Very well, face me if you dare then. Though I must warn you, many have tried to take from me the title of the best Muay Thai fighter in the world. So far, none have succeeded, he said, taking his usual tiger guard stance. Come then, let us see which of the two emperors is the true ruler of Muay Thai. Agard Jumsai replied with a smirk of his own and assumed a Tang guard Mei stance. Both stared at each other for a moment, about to begin their confrontation when Mills Lane interrupted them. Hey, wait a minute. If you guys want to have a Muay Thai match, why not use the ring over there? The senior referee asked, motioning towards the forgotten quadrilateral. Both fighters stopped momentarily to address the authority figure. It is of no use for our needs. It was damaged during the battle of Diego Carlo and his apprentice against Vega and Balrog. Sagat pointed out. There are holes in the mat, he said, indicating to the orifices left by attacks made by Diego Carlo and Kushinada respectively. That, then, can be easily fixed, a voice said, coming from among Pan's followers' lines. All the gathered warriors turned to find an awoken Diego Carlo, still pretty beat up, being supported by Rachel, who was wearing a blanket to cover her private bits from view. My helpers can fix the damage done to the ring in no time. I came prepared for the eventuality of the ring being damaged by bringing along supplies to repair it. Diego Carlos said, motioning towards the weirdos that comprised the luchador's masked henchmen who were standing awkwardly at the side of the ring. Everybody watching gave him a flat, odd look. Once again, how the hell could you have all of that ready in only a day, while making your way here after escaping from prison? Said a stumped Whip in a dry tone. Diego Carlo kept speaking, pretending he hadn't heard Whip. Go, my little friends. Prepare the ring for these two warriors. He ordered to his helpers, whom immediately set off to do as instructed. They quickly replaced the ring's damaged mat with another that was being stashed all rolled up underneath the quadrilateral itself, where one usually stores chairs, tables, bats and other weapons for the wrestling matches. Just as Diego Carlo promised, the ring was ready to be used once more in no time flat. Most of the fighters were actually impressed by the efficiency of Diego Carlo's helpers on having everything ready for a match. There, it is ready, you may now use the ring for your match, declared Diego Carlo, gesturing towards the newly fixed quadrilateral. Both Muay Thai fighters shared a look and shrugged, not seeing any other reason to complain. They decided to head over the ring and carry their match in them, Mills Lane trailing behind. Once they were atop the quadrilateral, the senior referee called them both to the center of the ring. All right, now we can have a proper Muay Thai match. I assume since both of you are veteran combatants of this sport, you should already know the rules for this match, but let me do a brief explanation nevertheless for the sake of the audience. Now I want a clean, good fight. No biting, spitting, head-butting, eye gouging or swearing. No hitting below the belt, holding your opponent with arm bars or leg locks or employing techniques from other disciplines outside Muay Thai. No touching the ropes or deliberately falling on your opponent. Each round, as you know, will have a duration of 3 minutes with 2 minutes rest between rounds. However, since this is not an official match, there will be no round limit. The fight will continue until one of you hits the mat and is unable to get back on his feet. Normally I wouldn't allow a match to take place as neither of you are wearing gloves, but since I know both of you are from Thailand, where it's not unusual for battles to take place with the combatants only wearing bandages around their fists, I'll allow both of you to fight as you are. On that note, grabbing will be allowed as long as it is to deliver a Muay Thai technique. In case of clinching, there will be a countdown to 10 before I force both of you to separate. Now gentlemen, do you agree to these terms? Mills Lane asked, glancing between the two combatants, who both replied with sharp nods, never breaking eye contact with their opponent. Very well then, now I will step aside to allow you two to perform your Y crew dances before beginning this match. Meet me at this spot once you are done, he said before moving away to give space to the two fighters to perform the traditional sacred dance of Muay Thai to give homage to previous masters of the discipline. Their prayers didn't lack anything, as Diego Carlos' henchmen provided the traditional music for the rite with cymbals, tom-toms and reed pipes that they also brought along. Again stumping people like Whip, who still couldn't figure out when they had gotten all those things in short notice. So both figures started to do the traditional dance, Jumsai displaying an intimidating prowess and aggression, but it fell short against Sagat's sheer ferocity and power. Once they were done, both combatants returned to the center of the ring to be addressed one final time by Mills Lane. All right, are you done? Nothing is being forgotten. No last-minute regrets, he asked to the fighters, who said nothing in return. Then, let's get it on, Mills Lane declared, pumping his fist before moving aside. The sound of the bell signaling the beginning of the round as one of Diego Carlos' helpers had been assigned to man it. Agard Jumsai vs Sagat. Both combatants immediately assumed combat stances and proceed to address each other. I thank you for giving me the chance to pit my strength against yours. Whatever the outcome, know it is for me a great honor to face you, Jumsai said honestly as he prepared to launch his attack. Then show me your gratitude by coming at me with everything you got, Sagat replied back with a roar as he too prepared to throw his own attack. Both fighters then leapt at each other at the same time with a flying knee attack, officially beginning the match. Gemon Tepi. Tiger knee. Both combatants clashed, intending to land their attacks. However, several factors played a hand in which one of the attacks would be successful. As it is, the primary factor would be height. Even though both combatants were Muay Thai grandmasters with decades of experience, Sagat held easily the height advantage. As from all the people gathered in the construction site, he was by far the tallest person around, towering several feet above Agar Jumsai, even though the Demon Emperor was also a man with a height well above the average. This also meant that Sagat had the reach advantage too, as his limbs, arms and legs, were longer than Jumsai's own. This meant that Jumsai had to travel a longer distance before his attack could connect with Sagat, who in turn had much less trouble and a shorter distance to do the same. There was also their techniques to take into consideration. Even though both are experienced Muay Thai fighters, who have a reputation of spending most of their time polishing their techniques, Sagat has also the advantage on this as he has had more years to improve his techniques than Jumsai, due to him being a more veteran figure. There's also the fact that Sagat, when he was developing his own style of Muay Thai, used to focus heavily on the techniques that would become his signature attacks, practicing them until reaching perfection, and since then he has taken great pains to make sure not to lose that edge and even improve them beyond their previous limits, a feat achieved mostly due to his obsession of fighting Ryu in a rematch, a goal he ultimately managed to achieve not too long ago. So for those who were aware of these facts, it didn't come as a surprise that when both fighters finally slammed with each other in the air, Sagat's knee had connected in full with Jumsai's face while his own attack still was midway from connecting. The force of the strike was so great that it pushed Jumsai backwards with enough strength to do a 360 spin in the air, head first. The Demon Emperor managed to recover and land on his feet, a smile on his lips despite having just endured such powerful strike. He brought one of his thumbs to wipe the bloody bruise at the corner of his mouth. Excellent. Just as I had expected of the legendary Emperor of Muay Thai. He rose back up again with a laugh, his muscles being shown for all to see, excitement filling every single one of his pores. This is just like I have always dreamed of. Sagat simply retook his guard stance and prepared for the next attack. Less talking, more fighting, and with that Agar Jumsai rushed towards Sagat again and began to trade blows with him, resulting in an impressive display of skill as both combatants went at each other with all kinds of elbow and knee strikes, punches and kicks while blocking or counteracting when necessary. Showing why both of them had well earned the title of Emperor and marveling the audience at their mastery of Muay Thai. It was during this exchange of blows that Jumsai decided to take a risky gamble and dropped his defense entirely, cutting off guard practically everyone who knew a thing or two about fighting. Sagat obviously had his suspicions, believing his opponent was planning something, but not being someone to ignore an opening, he took the bait and launched a kick towards Jumsai. Just as he had feared, it was a feint. Jumsai easily evaded the attack and slammed his knee with a powerful strike right in the middle of Sagat's chest where his heart was located. Yan Erawan. The attack was strong enough to stop Sagat in his tracks. He had felt that kick, enough to deserve a small grimace of discomfort. So his opponent had proved to be a strong enough fighter after all. This fight may prove entertaining. Sagat retaliation came immediately as he ignored the pain inflicted and grabbed his opponent by the shoulder and lifted him up in the air by rising to his full height. A feat that was rather amazing and disconcerting for the surprised Jumsai. The one-eye tall fighter then proceeded to deliver a mighty knee strike in full into Jumsai's abdomen, 1, 2, 3 times in quick succession before sending the bronze-skinned fighter away from him on the last hit. Jumsai skidded through the canvas a little before managing to stop his motion and was left panting on his knees on the mat. He looked up at the bigger eye patch-wearing fighter and saw Sagat smirk at him, making a come-at-me motion while pointing at his scar on the spot he just had been hit at. Before any of the fighters could do anything, the bell rang loudly signaling the end of the round. Mills Lane stepped between them and motioned to go rest to their corners. Sagat did so but without taking his gaze away from Jumsai until he had completely turned his back to the bronze-skinned fighter. Jumsai could simply stare at the retreating back of his adversary, knowing that he had found a mighty challenge to overcome. It made him grin despite the pain on his ribs. As both combatants rested a little while being attended by Diego Carlos handlers, the people watching the fight began to become excited by the fight between these grandmasters. Those who were fanatics of Muay Thai especially so, as they were having one of their most wished fight coming true, to see which one of the two emperors was truly the greatest. As soon as the bell sounded again signaling the start of the second round, Jumsai didn't wasted any time and went in the offensive by jumping high in the air. Once he reached the apex of his jump, the bronze-skinned fighter turned his body until he was facing his opponent upside down in the air. He then dived towards Sagat with a spinning airborne knee strike. Sombun Yan Erawan. Sagat didn't even blink at the incoming attack, he just bade his time and prepared for the right moment to counteract. Just when his opponent was upon him, did the one-eyed emperor let loose his counterattack. Tiger uppercut. Using another of his signature moves, Sagat was able to repel the assault of his opponents. Again, taking advantage of his greater reach, Sagat was able to nail Jumsai right in the chin, sending the demon emperor spiraling away from him due to his own spinning momentum. Jumsai crashed on the canvas loudly as Sagat simply landed back without difficulty. He rubbed a streak-marked throat the length of his left cheek, a result of Jumsai's attack narrowly hitting him when it whizzed past him. Get back up again, there's still a lot of time in the clock before this round is done. Sagat said, assuming a defensive stance once more. Jumsai rised up again promptly and checked his jaw with a hand before taking a stance of his own. He then proceeded to face Sagat again by lunging at him. Sagat's response was almost immediate. Tiger shot. The fiery energy projectile struck Jumsai in full on the chest and blasted him away, sending him back into the canvas once more. The bronze-skinned rolled around the mat to quickly get back on his feet. Hadn't expected that. I had forgotten you are one of the few Muay Thai practitioners to have mastered energy attacks. Sagat just smirked in reply. Let's see if you are skilled enough to dodge my tiger shots, he said, getting ready to attack again. Jumsai huffed with a smirk of his own. This should be interesting, he said before rushing at this opponent again. Sagat replied with an energy projectile a second time. Tiger shot. But Jumsai was already expecting that and sprung forth his plan to counteract the technique. Jumsai waited for the last moment before the energy projectile hit him and then somersaulted above it with a backflip towards his opponent, the fiery projectile sailing underneath him, before he slammed into Sagat with a barrage of kicks, caughting the bigger Muay Thai fighter off guard. Framay Tyrannon Ilftrome. The impact struck Sagat in full on his head, but did little to hinder him. He retaliated with a series of punches to Jumsai's face. The two of them engaged once more in an exchange of blows. But unlike the last one, this time Jumsai had already a measure of Sagat's style of fighting to come up with a way to gain the upper hand. Ducking underneath a particularly vicious elbow strike, Jumsai acted. He immediately lunged forward towards Sagat and flanked the bigger man until he had positioned behind him before grabbing him with one hand by the hip, using his opponent as support to lift himself entirely from the ground. He then straightened his body horizontally to his opponent before delivering a powerful spinning punch that struck Sagat in full in his back. Kuryu Rushi Ron. The punch staggered Sagat enough to send him down on one knee as Jumsai backflipped through the air, sailing above him before landing in front of the one-eyed fighter with his back turned towards him. Fei, the bronze-skinned fighter smirked in amused confidence before he prepared to deliver the follow-up. He inhaled a deep breath in concentration, making his muscles to tense and increase their size, giving him more punching power before jumping towards his opponent with his arm held high to deliver a devastating elbow strike. Gambraba Ramasun Quan Khan. It was in the moment when Jumsai was upon him, that an apparently tired Sagat raised his head sharply to look at Jumsai, a quick shine flashing through his only pupilless eye before he unleashed his counterattack. Tiger! Sagat exclaimed as he launched himself at his opponent and stopped him cold in his tracks with a powerful knee strike to the face, the strength of the attack pushing Jumsai backwards and hitting him several times. Suicide! Sagat finished his attack by connecting a more powerful version of his tiger uppercut just as Jumsai was about to fall to the ground, the punch striking the Demon Emperor several times right in the jaw as it pushed him upwards until he was sent rocketing into the air. Just as Sagat's feet touched the ground, he began to charge his next attack as Jumsai's falling body was coming right behind him. He opened his arms wide and began to gather a great quantity of fiery energy on his hands. Tiger! Before he brought both of his hands together causing an impressive giant ball of fire to form inside Sagat's grasp just as Jumsai's body was about to pass in front of him towards the ground. Cannon! Jumsai crashed upon the immense ball of fire, which was easily as tall as Sagat, and was enveloped by the scorching fire, each swipe of the rotating ball of fire striking him and searing him greatly until finally, exploding in a thunderous conflagration that blew Jumsai away. The Demon Emperor crashed into the mat violently. Mills Lane began to count as Jumsai laid sprawled in the ground. He managed to quickly get back up despite his steaming wounds and turned to look back at Sagat. Both fighters locked their gazes, panting with exertion. It was then that the bell rang signaling the end of the second round. Well, I must say I'm rather pleased. Sagat is really making this fight to be quite entertaining, and I must say I'm fairly impressed by his level of skill. He is rather strong for a human. Pan commented half musingly. Indeed, there's a reason he is called the Emperor of Muay Thai Mistress. Mature said from her position behind the right shoulder of the alien girl. I have no doubt he will return from this match victorious. Pan acknowledged those words with a nod. Neither do I just hope he doesn't end this battle too soon. 3 rounds seem hardly enough time to enjoy a good match. She said in passing. That depends more on the level of his opponent. If he is not strong enough to keep up with him, then I'm afraid this match will be rather short, Vice said this time, standing behind Pan's other shoulder. That's exactly what I'm dreading, Pan exclaimed with a sigh before looking back to the match. Once starting the third round, Jumsai seemed to have decided to change strategy, knowing by now that trying to attack his opponent with a flying strike first would leave him vulnerable to one of his uppercuts. He decided to approach carefully this time while keeping at a safe distance from Sagat attacks. The Emperor of Muay Thai tried to go at the offensive by tossing a couple of long kicks to test his opponent's defenses, but Jumsai pulled himself out of range every time a kick went on his direction. It quickly began to annoy Sagat, who decided to put pressure on his adversary by spamming a few tiger shots. Jumsai was forced to block the first couple of fiery projectiles, managing to stop them without receiving much harm in return. Despite finding himself suddenly under a barrage of projectiles, Jumsai did nothing to try to avoid them and continued keeping his distance from the one-eyed fighter. Until finally, after Sagat had extended himself to toss one of his fiery projectiles, did Jumsai act. The Demon Emperor ducked suddenly to evade the energy blast and launched himself towards his opponent, the fiery projectile sailing over him. He rammed into Sagat by connecting a couple of elbow strikes into his stomach, making the taller combatant to lurch forward. He then catched the eye patch wearing in a clinch and began to deliver a barrage of knee strikes into his abdomen, using his great speed to deliver dozens of strikes in the space of a second. The attack seemed to leave Sagat totally helpless, as he could do nothing but wriggle as a stringless puppet while his opponent pummeled his midriff. Suddenly, without warning, Sagat counteracted by lifting his leg and blocking the next attack using his own knee to stop Jumsai's strike. The surprise of his opponent allowed Sagat to retaliate by launching a close-quarter tiger knee from his position with his other leg connecting with Jumsai's stomach in full and blowing the bronze-skinned fighter away from Sagat. Both combatants were left panting on their knees after that last attack, Mills Lane beginning the count for the both of them. They quickly got back on their feet and resumed the fight, Jumsai continuing of his approach of keeping himself out of Sagat's reach while waiting for the right moment to strike. But Sagat would have none of that and decided to break his opponent's strategy. He launched a low tiger shot to force his enemy to leap over it. For Jumsai it was an opportunity to close some distance easily. What he wasn't expecting was Sagat to follow up on that attack. Tiger kick. Sagat knocked Jumsai out of the air by connecting a knee strike again into his abdomen. The Demon Emperor landed on his feet but clutched his side with a wince. That last knee strike had certainly hurt him. He didn't had time to ponder as Sagat was once again upon him. The Emperor of Muay Thai began to rain blows on his opponent. Jumsai found himself hard-pressed to block them all. He managed to block a couple of short punches but the following leg sweep caught him off guard, which allowed Sagat to successfully connect an elbow strike and a short tiger uppercut to lift his opponent from the ground in quick succession. He then released his ki and delivered 2 consecutive spinning long kicks before launching himself forward, straight as an arrow, to finish with a powerful flying kick that connected with Jumsai in full and hitted him several times as it dragged him along through the air before sending him colliding into the edge of the ring. Tiger raid. In the end, Jumsai was left groaning in the ground. Against all odds he tried to rise back up again just as Mills Lane approached him to begin the count. He began to concentrate his ki to gain the strength to stand up again. His show of power tensing his muscles as a dark fearsome aura began to emanate from his body. Once he had rised back to his full height, he was ready to repay Sagat for the attack he had given him. Unfortunately for him, it was then that the bell rang again. Pan let out an appreciative whistle. Well, this is turning out better than I anticipated. That demon emperor is proving to be quite the good sport. I've certainly been enjoying this match. Oh, but it seems the next round will be the last one, seeing how serious and focused he has become. She drawled, a little put off knowing that all good things have to end sometime. About time. They better get it done quickly. I want to have my own fight already, exclaimed an irritated Yuri. You are still miffed for having been cheated out from your fight with the Russian boy, don't you? Asked, stated a nonchalant Foxy with a raised eyebrow. The bell rang again, signaling the beginning of the fourth round. Jumsai approached his opponent with grim determination, his entire posture indicating he was done playing games. I have enjoyed our fight greatly, however it seems clear that if I want to achieve victory in here, I will have to use my most powerful technique without restraint. Whatever the outcome, it has been an honor. Jumsai said before starting to concentrate his ki, once again gathering such great quantities of it that it became visible as a dark fiery aura rising from his body. He then assumed a stance and began to perform the dance and movements of the Y Crew prayer done at the beginning of the match, except he was now throwing real punches instead of simple katas. He began to increase the intensity of his movements and his speed to rise exponentially, leaving after images of himself performing the right through his entire side of the ring. The single pupilless eye of Sagat opened wide in surprise just for a moment, recognizing what Agard Jumsai was doing. You will dare to use such dangerous technique in order to achieve victory. I never expected your determination to be so great that you would willingly put your life on the line in such manner. He lifted his arms in front of him and assumed a stance. So this how you want to play our last round? Very well, you are a worthy opponent, indeed. He said before he too began perform his own prayer and dance as he exuded ki from every single pore of his body as he leaved afterimages throughout his side of the ring too. Both streams of images of the two combatants began to approach each other in the middle of the ring, and that was when hell was let loose. The entire ring began to rattle as high-speed impacts exploded everywhere as the afterimages of the two fighters popped at fast and random intervals throughout its length. Mills Lane was forced to step down off the ring due to the thunderous force displaced by each impact. Whatever technique the two Muay Thai fighters were performing had clearly drawn their entire focus on it. Bolisud look my. Encanto Apache had dropped his usual clueless funk for an uncharacteristically serious demeanor, catching many off guard. So Agard, you have decided to use that technique, he said in a somber mood, looking at the fight intently. Kenichi turned towards him in alarm. Apache-sensei, isn't that the technique that Master Jumsai used when? Yes Kenichi, it is, Apache stated, interrupting his former apprentice. In heaven the goddesses watching the fight were mighty impressed by the battle. Who would have thought humans could be that powerful? Wow, that's some serious skill right there, said an odd Chrono as she, being a recruit for the Valkyries, had received an extensive martial instruction under Lind. Said warrior goddess nodded in agreement, the great skills and abilities displayed in this battle making her heart sing with joy, the call for battle tugging at her soul becoming stronger and stronger with each passing moment. For the rest of the match the audience was treated to a flurry of afterimages releasing an alarmingly large number of thundershocks, which were clearly the result of the two combatants clashing at speeds beyond the capacity of the human eye to detect, on an increasingly deteriorating quadrilateral. The people watching simply couldn't take their gaze away from the destructive display, seemingly hypnotized by the combat dance. From what the afterimages could show, it seemed both Muay Thai grandmasters were busy punching, blocking, counteracting and evading each other. It was hard to tell when either of the two would stop. Both combatants remained locked in their struggle until the bell rang again to signal the end of the match, yet neither of the fighters stopped in their attacks and kept engaged on their deadly dance. Mills Lane didn't take kindly for their obvious disregard for the rules. Hey you two, break it up already, the bell has already rung. Don't force me to stop this fight and disqualify you two. Make no mistake that I will do it. I don't care if I piss the entire population of Earth for doing so. The senior referee stated with conviction, his posture clearly telling he wasn't going to budge on this issue. "It is useless, Senor Referee," Diego Carlo said, appearing from behind Mills Lane as he was being dragged by his apprentice. "That technique both of them are using will not allow them to stop until one of them overcomes the other." "What you mean by that?" Mills Lane asked with a fleeting glance. He was not the only one curious, as several of Pan's followers and the people watching through the live feed also wanted to know what the South American luchador was talking about. "For what I've gathered by witnessing Agard Jumsai training regiments and my conversations with him, this technique named Bolisud Lukmai is like a variant of the Y Crew, the prayer that Muay Thai fighters perform to show respect to the spirits of past masters and make sure that the condition of their environment is appropriate to do battle. In the past, the Y Crew was also used by Muay Thai fighters to check their style of fighting and change in case both combatants were using the same style. However, since the Bolisud Lukmai is a dance modified to be used in battle and it is designed to heighten the fighting potential of a warrior to its maximum. The dance focuses a fighter's concentration solely into battle, bringing all the power of his spirit outside. It was said that if two combatants using the same style of fighting were to employ this technique against each other, they would have to stop and change styles. Otherwise they would be doomed to attack each other endlessly while destroying everything within range of their attacks, only stopping until one of them is dead or unable to continue. As it is, since both Sagat and Agard are employing different styles, the technique will only end when one shows a clear supremacy over the other," Diego Carlo explained to a rapt audience. "So you say there's nothing we can do to stop them from attacking each other?" asked Mills Lane pointedly. "Oh, we could try to stop them if we want, since the cycle of endless violence only applies for fighters using the same style, but I advise against it. There's still a lot of power being expelled even with the technique being applied properly. It is much easier to just wait for things to play out," Diego Carlo replied evenly. So everybody brought their attention back to the ring, to the show of afterimages attacking each other. As the seconds passed, it slowly became clear who of the two fighters was gaining the advantage. It would seem the spirits were favoring Sagat today, for Jumsai afterimages appeared to be losing ground against the one-eyed fighter Own, while Sagat Ki seemed to rise exponentially with each passing moment. The moment of truth came when Sagat finally managed to gain the upper hand by dissipating all afterimages with a burst of his ki, so powerful it made Jumsai miss a step for just a brief second. Enough time for the Emperor of Muay Thai to land a combination of elbow strikes and mid-range kick, immediately followed by a quick tiger uppercut to lift Jumsai off the ground, for then to Sagat to connect a long high kick with his foot on an aerial Jumsai to put him in position for the coup de grace. "Tiger!" Sagat yelled, tensing all his muscles and gathering all the ki he could call upon, before exploding forwards with a powerful knee strike that released a brilliant flame that struck Jumsai in full, before following with another tiger uppercut much more powerful than any that had come before on this fight. As Sagat's fist was wrapped totally in flames so massive that when Jumsai was punched by that fist, he was sent high into the by a pillar of fire that left a blazing trail on its wake, Sagat following close behind as his fist struck him several times on its ascension until he was blown away by the raging inferno. Ellipsis. Destruction. In the end, the scorched body of Jumsai crashed violently into the ground outside the quadrilateral, pretty close to where the referee and Diego Carlo were standing. The Latino luchador approached the downed Muay Thai practitioner, being aided his apprentice. "So, how are you feeling, my amigo?" Jumsai smiled despite his singed broken state. "It seems I've been defeated, my friend," he said before losing consciousness. Mills Lane was over him in an instant, checking his condition before lifting both his arms to declare the victor. "He's out. The winner of this match is Sagat, the one and only Emperor of Muay Thai. Agard Jumsai vs Sagat. Sagat wins KO." Pan gave a nod after hearing that result, not surprised in the least by it. She then idly watched Sagat getting down of the now totally devastated ring, before he went to collect Jumsai and drag him back towards her location, Diego Carlo and his apprentice following behind. She then turned towards the rest of her followers, specifically, Yuri. "Get ready, the chance to fight you've been wishing for has finally arrived." The Korean woman response was simply a disturbing smile. Fall of Yami Round 3 Part 2. The next line of warriors under Pan's allegiance was already on the front, waiting eagerly to meet their victims. Those that had volunteered were among the most lethal or cruel followers of the overpowered alien girl from outer space. From left to right they were Kazuya Mishima, mature, Vice, Foxy, Nina Williams, Yuri, who was ecstatic for having a second chance to do battle after her previous opponent was knocked out due to unrestrained barbarism, and finally, Dr. Jackal. Despite being nothing wrong with this matchup at first sight, Pan was frowning for some unknown reason. She turned her head to the left, towards the edge where the line of those that had pledged to follow her ended, and looked directly at Kagero Sai, who was still with his regular dumb expression at Whip's left. "Oi, Sai, stop fooling around and get out there to fight. I'm tired of seeing you doing nothing but stare into space," she barked, pointedly. The tall pale man immediately got out of his fuzz and looked towards his boss with a slow and calm turn of his neck. He nodded. "As you wish, Pan-chan," he said before walking towards the front and standing in a spot between Yuri and Dr. Jackal. The remaining Grandmasters of Yami were left looking at the proc settings with a dumbstruck expression. "Well, this is a surprise. This is the first time I see Sai acknowledging another female without confusing her with Kushinada," said a surprised Seitaro Reigo while he straightened his sunglasses. Said woman replied with a nod. Indeed, he is supposed to be unable to remember the faces of any woman he meets due to his disinterest caused by his devotion to his art. So far, I was the only one to have caused him enough of an impression to leave a lasting mark in his memory. Seems the Pan girl also managed to achieve such rare feat. Well done, Kushinada remarked with a slight hint of disdain. The tall dark-clad man turned towards Kushinada with his blank expression. "How could I not acknowledge Pan-chan, Mike-chan? It's almost impossible not to notice her," Sai said as he began to recall his first meeting with the alien girl. A few days ago, Pan was walking towards a small hut lost somewhere in the mountains, Miu walking alongside her with her secretaries, Bison's former underlings and Nina lined around them too. Kenichi was trailing hesitantly behind them all with a nervous expression on his face. "Pan, tell me again why you want to meet this guy. He's dangerous and creepy as hell," said the young apprentice trying to contain a shiver. Pan just limited herself to turn her head behind to give a look to Kenichi without stopping her pacing. "I am dangerous. I could split this entire planet apart if I felt like it and kill the whole of humanity in the process. And I don't see you crapping yourself in your pants about that. As for why do we need to speak to him? Well, what better way to know the inside workings of this Yami organization, that you and Miu have been telling me about, than to speak with someone who used to be part of his ranks. So don't freak out. However dangerous this swordsman may be, I'm pretty sure I'll find a way to deal with him somehow if the situation requires it," she said, before dismissing her newest apprentice. Kenichi just slumped his shoulders in dejection. "Great, that's another thing to worry about that I didn't need," he muttered before trying to catch up with the rest of the group. As the small entourage got closer to the hut, they were able to notice the well-kept farming fields that had been digged around the small cottage. Glancing around the place, the group quickly took notice of the impressive tall black-clad man that was busy tilling the land with cheerful devotion. Pan addressed his newest apprentice once more. "Is this the man?" Kenichi replied with a nod. "Yes, just be careful not to startle him," he warned. Pan didn't reply and simply approached the tall pale man from behind, who didn't seem to be aware of their presence. Kenichi reacted frantically at that action and tried to stop the alien girl. "Stop. Don't get too close to him." "Huh." Pan was only able to turn her head and give a confused look at his apprentice, before a flash of silver swiped at her. Kenichi had expected that surprise attack to have struck Pan in full, but to his growing surprise, the alien girl easily managed to parry the attack with her index finger despite her distracted state. The only sound that could be heard throughout the fields was that of metal being suddenly diverted. Ching! For a moment, all the people present on the farming fields stood still in silent witness as the kinetic energy released by the clash of opposing forces spread through the field and disturbed the small patches of grass on the tilled soil while also ruffling briefly the clothes of those close to the impact point. After everything settled down, the sound of the sudden attack being launched finally managed to reach the ears of the gathered group of fighters. Swish! Kenichi simply stood there gaping for a moment while Pan turned to look at the dark-clad swordsman once more, a wide grin etched on her face. Well, not bad. That was an attack fast enough to easily surpass the speed of sound. I'm actually impressed about that. And to think he launched it so nonchalantly. Kagero-sai has trained extensively on his art with such devotion that he is able to unconsciously launch automatic supersonic attacks to anything that gets close to him on a 3-meter range. Kenichi said after letting out a sigh. Pan just whistled in appreciation at that info. Now that's dedication. Let's test his skills some more. She declared before she began to poke the limits of Sai's range with her finger, blocking each of the automatic attacks delivered by the still unaware swordsman who was still contentedly tilling the fields with his hoe, the same hoe he was using to launch his attacks at anything that got too close to his range. Talk about being oblivious. In the end Pan let out a satisfied giggle. Now this one I like. She declared with a mischievous grin. I was originally thinking to just simply ask him some questions, but after this little display of his skills, I think I want to recruit him into my ranks too. She said, much to the horror of her apprentice. What? Pan ignored Kenichi's outburst and directly addressed the tall pale man. So what do you say? Want to join my crew? Right now we still are building our foundation, but there's a lot of space for growth. She said with emphasis. The tall swordsman didn't give any sign of having heard her however, as he continued to diligently toil the fields to the exclusion of anything else around him. The alien girl was simply left there waiting for an answer in the open field. Obviously, she didn't take kindly to being ignored. Hey, what's wrong with you? Look at me when I'm talking to you. Pan exclaimed with great exasperation. Kenichi decided to intercede before the overpowered girl lost his patience. Pan, I think I forgot to mention that due to his strong commitment to the sword arts, he has zero interest on women. He usually tends to just plain ignore them, and if they actually manage to catch his attention, he always forgets their faces and instead confuses their identities with that of the only female grandmaster in Yami, Mikumo Kushinada. It seems she's been the only woman who has managed to cause an impression on him, he said, rubbing the back of his head in embarrassment at having forgotten such important piece information. Considering what the gender of his new sensei was, Pan simply frowned at those news, the curling of her lips being a sign of her displeasure. Then it seems I simply will have to make my own impression, she stated lightly, before her eyes rolled to the back of her head and she began to release a sample of her monstrous ki. The earth began to tremble violently in reaction to the impressive show of power. A sudden wind began to blow upon the field, lashing and whipping violently at the tilled dirt. Cracks began to appear on the groaning ground and all of the people present fell to their knees with panting labor when they felt the unbelievable power of the teenager from another world. The small display only lasted a few seconds, but it was more than enough to catch the tall black-clad man's attention, as there was no way he could ignore such overwhelming presence. He turned around in a single swift move. His totally widened eyes fell immediately over the person from whom he had felt such immense ki coming from. You're not Mike-chan. Who are you? I see, Kushinada said the most stoically she could, a small droplet of sweat running down her temple and the side of her attractive face. It was all she could say after hearing Sai's story of his first meeting with Pan. Really, it was simply unbelievable the power that short girl could manifest at the drop of a hat. She had the distinct feeling that the outcome of this encounter was not going to be on the side of Yami. It was a source of great frustration and shame to think all their carefully laid plans were about to be brought to a crushing end by a 16-year-old girl. To think someone as ridiculously powerful as her could exist, hard to believe she's still yet a child on the eyes of her race. It gnaws at her to think how powerful the older members of her species truly are. Makes her question why are they trying to defy her in the first place. The idea that others more powerful and older members of her race will come to Earth in search for her was terrifying in itself, but she cannot help but be intrigued also. On one hand, it scares her shitless to know her older relatives are leagues above her. But on the other, she can't help wanting to know more about the rest of her species, as she has always been a woman that has believed in the superiority of strength over everything else on this world, and here comes a girl from another planet whose race are the complete epitome of all her beliefs. Maybe she should seriously reconsider the idea of defecting to her side. It does seem to be the most sensible of options. She'll have to prove her worth and make amends for her previous conduct, though, while the century-old beauty was busy in thought, Whip assumed a thoughtful expression before she addressed the dark-clad swordsman that had previously been standing to her left. Hey, that's true. How come you didn't try to cut me in half during all this time you were standing near me? Aren't you supposed to automatically attack anything that gets close to you in a 3-meter radius? She asked. Sai simply turned to her with a blank look. You did not get close to me. I got close to you. There's a difference between the two, Mike-chan. Was the pale man's simple answer. Do not call me Mike-chan. My code name is Whip. The brunette girl said with a fulminant glare. Pan ignored the antics of her followers, and prompted for the fights to resume. Would you mind to choose your opponents already? We don't have all the time of the world, you know. She said with a hint of impatience towards the Yami group. Kushinada replied with a nod and proceeded to get ready for the next set of battles alongside her fellow Yami grandmasters. In the end, after a brief debate and due to the fact that the last set of fights was mostly composed of members of the unarmed division, the next matches were agreed to be as followed. Kazuya Mishima vs Seitaro Reigo, Mature vs Luff, Vice vs Marmaduke Brown, Foxy vs Reiki Hoshinano, Nina Williams vs Alexander Gaidar, Yuri vs Mikumo Kushinada, Sai Kagero vs Rin Tachibana and Dr. Jackal vs Edeltraft Vonshira. All throughout the world, the people watching the live feed were growing anxious for the next set of battles, whether they approve them or not. No one could deny they were impressive to witness. Well then, if you're done finding your dance partner, I guess it's time to move on with the show. Mr. Lane, would you kindly? Pan said, motioning to the senior referee. The old official simply replied with a nod and proceeded to walk towards the lined fighters. Mills Lane stood between the first pair of fighters preparing to give his speech. Alright, you guys must know the rules by now. You two will beat the crap out of each other until one of you is unable to remain standing. There are no restrictions or forbidden moves, so everything goes. If at one point during this fight one of you feels that their lives are under serious threat, well, that is your problem. Do any of you gentlemen understand and agree to these terms? He asked, looking between the two combatants who replied with a nod. Then let's get it on. He declared, pumping his fist before moving onwards the next pair of fighters. Kazuya Mishima vs Seitaro Reigo. Seitaro Reigo stood confidently as he unsheathed his kodachi, making a small show out of it. Do not worry, I'll make sure to give you a swift, painless death. He boldly declared as he took a combat stance. Kazuya simply smirked mockingly, dismissing the threats of his opponent. Funny, I was just about to say the same thing to you, with the difference that your own death will be neither swift nor painless. He said, assuming a stance of his own as his eyes shone with a piercing crimson glint. Mills was already with the next set of fighters, giving his customary speech. Well, let's make this quick. Normally I would say how lucky you are, boy, for being partnered with such a smoking hot lady. He said, turning towards Luff, the blind boy barely reacting to his words. But that look she's giving you and the creepy way she's cracking her knuckles doesn't give me the best of confidences. Anyway, that's going to be your problem, not mine. So let's get it on. He finished pumping his fist and moving away. Mature vs Luff. Come on boy, let's play. Mature said in a sensual tone as she readied her extremely sharpened nails. What a pity that you've decided to forfeit your life by facing me, but as they say, beauty is such a fleeting thing, he said as he prepared to face his opponent. The senior referee was about to speak with the next set of combatants. Okay, you two. I'm not exactly sure how a lithe unarmed woman will be able to face a freaking armored knight wielding a goddamn giant axe, but I've seen you martial artists pulling some weird impressive shit so far, so I think this match will work out somehow. Anyway, let's get it on. He declared with his usual fist pumping before he moved towards the next fighters. Vice vs Marmaduke Brown. Vice immediately crouched on the ground and began to stretch her body while meowing and purring like a feline in a very enticing and sexy manner. Meow, come over here, my dear. Let us see if that armor of yours is enough to stop my nails from turning you into ribbons. She said, standing up again, showing her glinting sharp nails for all to see. The response of her opponent was to simply release a grunt as he increased his grip on his weapon. HRRRMMM. Alright, you two, come over here. Mills Lane said, calling the next combatants to him. He looked between Foxy and Reiki for a moment, taking notice of their weapons. Well, seems we're going to have a classic duel between swordsmen, women. Maybe now we can pull that old feud finally to rest and discover which sword style is truly the superior one, Western or Eastern. Anyhow, time to get cracking. Let's get it on, Mills declared as he pumped and gave their space to the respective combatants. Foxy vs Reiki Hoshinano. Let's get this done quickly, Foxy said, unsheathing her sword and taking a fencing stance. I have better things to do than wasting my time in here. Reiki replied, assuming a stance of her own. Such arrogance, it will be your doom. Again, we find the bald referee standing, this time, between Nina and Gaidar. Well, you guys seemed pretty hardcore at first look. Guess your fight is going to be a pretty awesome one. But don't let me to keep you from getting into it. Just get it on, he said, doing his now common expression before he moved on. Nina Williams vs Alexander Gaidar. Both combatants simply stood there on their places as they pulled out their personal gloves and began to don and adjust them. I hope you are a worthy challenge. It is such a disappointment when I face opponents that are simply not on the level, Nina said, giving a sharp tug to the glove covering her left hand. I'll do my best not to try to disappoint, Moya Prelest, my pretty, Gaidar replied as he finished to don his gloves before moving his arms back to his sides and closing his fists so sharply and strongly that his knuckles cracked. Korosho. Good, was Nina's reply in Russian. Once more, Mills was about to give his usual pre-battle speech to the next pair of fighters. All right, ladies, you're the next ones on the list. He turned towards Yuri. Well, nice to see you're still eager to get some action. Must have been quite the bummer to see your previous dance partner being taken away so abruptly. Let's us hope this time nothing gets in the way of this battles. Okay, enough talking. Let's get it on, ladies, he said before moving away. Yuri vs Mikumo Kushinada. Yuri let out a psychotic laugh of glee, as she leered at Kushinada with a disturbing smile. Finally, I am able to play. Come, get closer. I am curious to know how the blood of an old lady like you tastes like. Kushinada was not impressed by the maniac in front of her, as she barely reacted to her taunts. I guess it's up to me to teach you how to speak to your elders and betters, child, she said with boundless stoicism. Okay, you two, get over here, said Mills Lane, calling the next combatants, and took a moment to appraise them, looking over Betwin Kagerosai and Rintachi Bana. Well, I'll be damned. Seems to me we are about to have an actual real ninja battle. Though by just looking at the two of you, I can tell it's going to be weird as hell. Just look at Edward Scissorhands over here. I fear we might get sued for copyright infringement. But that's a concern for later. In the meantime, let's get it on, he declared before moving aside. Saikagero vs Rintachibana. Rin didn't waste any time to unsheath his sword and assumed a stance. I must say, I've always desired to pit my sword skills against yours. Let us see if you haven't rusted since the battle against my dear sister. Sai took a look at his opponent's stance and couldn't help but tilt his head to a side in curiosity. He pointed with his finger. That stance, it's the same as the one Mike Chan uses. Rin let out a brief chuckle in response. Indeed, I'm not surprised you took notice of that. You see, Shiger, the woman you call Mike Chan that defeated you and took your precious sword Setsunamaru from you, is my apprenticeship sibling. She and I were trained by the same master. So I ask you, former supersonic EI/, have you become strong enough to beat the combat style that has defeated you once already? In Kanto, a somber mood fell upon the young weapon mistress of the Ryazanpaku. Brother, she said in a barely audible whisper as she looked at the projection of the current battles. Back on the construction site, Mills Lane had at last reached the final set of combatants. So, it seems it's only you two fellows now. Thank God we're finally done, because I shouldn't be doing much strenuous effort at my age. Anyway, you guys should know what the rules are by now. So start beating the crap out of each other and let's get it on, he said, and pumped his fist a final time before moving away to give space to the ensuing combat. Dr. Jackal vs Edeltraft von Shira. Dr. Jackal showed his eagerness for battle by displaying a closed fist as scalpel knives suddenly appeared inside the spaces between his fingers. Well, shall we? He asked to his opponent with his usual jovial expression. The blossoms that wither and die in the moors harbor a hidden beauty that can move even the harshest of hearts. Adeltraft replied with his usual cryptic poems. Dr. Jackal didn't seem put off in the slightest by his adversary's eccentricity. His smile didn't falter an inch even as he tilted his head to a side in wonderment. "I'll take that as a yes," he said, before launching his blades at his opponent. Kazuya Mishima vs Seitaro Reigo. Kazuya didn't waste any time to launch himself at his opponent and rained a barrage of kicks and punches at him with the single-minded purpose of breaking him. Seitaro showed why he had earned the title of Grandmaster of his art, as he successfully evaded every single attack that his adversary threw at him. Kazuya was growing restless as his enemy vaulted over a low kick with a backflip and put some distance between the two. "You will need much more than that if you wish to touch me," the assassin taunted with a condescending smirk, causing Kazuya to sneer at him anger. "Let us see if you're fast enough to dodge my attacks," he said, before rushing towards Kazuya at supersonic speeds and tried to cut him in half with an overhead slash. Kazuya managed to barely evade the extremely fast attack. He wasn't completely successful however, as his opponent managed to nick him with the tip of his sword, leaving a slightly bleeding gash across his chest. It was a shallow cut, so Kazuya easily ignored it, focusing instead on retaliating as it was custom of his aggressive fighting style by trying to deliver a left split kick at his opponent's face. Because the counterattack had been almost immediate, Seitaro did not have enough time to try to dodge it. Instead he found it more efficient to block it. What he wasn't expecting was the electrical charge that the kick was packing behind it. "ECKKKKKKKKK." The ponytailed black-clad man exclaimed as he suddenly felt several volts of electricity running through his body, a fact that became even more aggravating for the reason that his sword, which he used to block the attack, helped to conduct electricity more easily because it was made of metal. Left split kick. Kazuya let out a cruel smirk as he capitalized in his newfound advantage by delivering a quick jab that Seitaro managed to block just in time despite having been caught off guard by the last electric attack, a testament of his skill. Followed by a strong straight that was also wreathed in electricity, shocking his opponent as it bypassed his defenses, leaving him helpless for the next attack. A spinning electrical back fist that struck Seitaro full on the face, leaving him dazed and pushing him backwards a couple of feet. Demon Slayer. The ponytailed assassin was left glaring at his opponent with no small degree of ire, as he wiped the blood trail enough from the corner of his mouth. Kazuya simply smirked and crossed his arms as he looked imperiously towards his enemy with prideful arrogance. "You were saying," he declared mockingly as he closed his fist with electrical sparks coiling around it. Mature vs Luff. The blonde femme fatale began her assault by lunging violently towards her enemy while slashing with her nails on all direction, a rather impressive feat considering she was carrying a 100-pound turret shell on her back. "Come on boy, show me what you've got." The blind boy didn't seem worried at the impending attack and simply tried to dodge the attack by jumping backwards. At first sight it appeared that Luff was just trying to evade Mature's slashes, but at the last moment, when both were stretched at maximum by their actions, Luff reacted by snatching the older woman from the air, grabbing her by the sleeves with his fingers. He then used the centrifugal force of her own momentum to spin her around and slam her on the ground with great force. Ogata Ryuu floating throw. As he was still grabbing her left arm, Luff decided to hold Mature with an arm bar on the ground while he used his legs to pin her down. He then proceeded to snap her limb. Mature didn't seem to care much about the apparent limp appendix, as her only reaction to having her arm broken was a small frown of, not discomfort, but boredom. It caught Luff totally by surprise when the arm he was holding suddenly stretched itself far beyond the length of a normal arm and coiled all around his upper body like a snake, trapping him completely. Mature then proceeded to lift him off the ground using that same arm and in an arc motion, slammed him back into the floor on her right side with enough forces to crack the earth underneath. Snake arms. Mature carefully got back on her feet and then proceeded to slam the blind boy several times more into the ground as to teach him a lesson. Once she was done, she let go of him and her arm slithered freely for a moment as it reduced its size back to a normal length. Once it was back inside the sleeve of her suit, Mature raised her hand and caressed it softly with the other as she cracked her knuckles. "Not bad, little boy," but I'm afraid you will need much more than that if you wish to defeat someone who carries the blood of the Orochi on her veins. She boasted with a terrifying and seductive smile. Luff spat some blood as he tried to get back on his feet, clutching his injured ribs from the pressure that Mature's arm had exerted over them. Even though he could not see her, he nonetheless glanced at the direction where his senses told him that the blonde woman was standing and could only curse in dread at his rotten luck. After all, he had already witnessed the power and violence that a carrier of the Orochi's blood could unleash and had no desire to face someone like Iori ever in combat. He gulped, wondering if he was about to suffer a fate similar to Ryoto's. Vice vs Marmaduke Brown. Both combatants were currently attacking at each other with everything they got, their slashes being so fast for the bare eye to follow. Only some brief delayed glints and flashes of silver were able to be seen as the ground around them started to be torn apart by sudden long deep cuts and claw marks that seemed to appear out of nowhere. Despite the fact she was wearing a very bulky armor, Marmaduke had no trouble matching the supersonic speeds of Vice, who also had a handicap of her own, as she was fighting with a heavy cumbersome turtle shell strapped on her back. The two opponents suddenly jumped away from each other, giving themselves some distance and breathing room. Both fighters then stood still, assessing each other. In the ensuing silence, a sudden cut appeared on Vice's suit right over her abdomen, and for Marmaduke, one of the spikes on the shoulder pads of her armor suddenly fell to the ground with a metallic clink, as it had been cleanly cut off. Vice took a moment to examine the cut on her suit. "Not bad, but it won't be enough to save you from getting your blood smeared in the ground by my nails," she said with a terrible laugh. Marmaduke simply replied with another grunt and prepared himself for another assault. Both combatants lunged at each other again and resumed their high-speed deadly battle. Foxy vs Reiki Hoshinano. The two women were busy trying to cut each other apart with their swords. So far Foxy was been mostly unsuccessful on landing a hit on her opponent, as her speed was clearly that of a grandmaster. But at least Reiki hadn't either been able to touch her in return, as even though she was been slightly slowed by her own turtle shell, her teleportation abilities were giving the Kenduist a hard time. After teleporting away from a Batojutsu slash that threatened to cut her head off, Foxy translocated several yards away from her opponent and sheathed her sword. She then pulled a lot of throwing knives from her belt, grabbing them between her fingers and reared back, crossing her arms in front of her chest before she launched them all towards her enemy at bullet speed. Unicorn Horn. The Kunoichi woman easily batted all the projectiles aside by spinning her sword around, creating a makeshift shield. It didn't matter, however, as those throwing knives had been just a distraction. The real attack came immediately afterwards, as Foxy translocated close and delivered a strong forward thrust at Reiki's midsection. The ninja woman was barely able to block that attack. The strength behind was surprisingly powerful, causing Reiki to sink her feet on the ground a few inches in order to avoid being blown away. Tree of Beginning. Foxy didn't let down on the attack and immediately followed up by spinning backwards and delivering a second powerful thrust, this time successfully blowing the shorter woman away several feet, as she was unable to brace herself enough and find enough purchase to withstand such strong attack. Memory of Noah. Reiki fell back to the ground on her knees as she was dragged briefly by the kinetic force of the attack. Once she came to a stop, she lifted her gaze towards her opponent and looked at Foxy with furious outrage. The white-haired woman simply twirled her fencing sword with one hand, assumed a stance once more. "Just as I had expected, this will not take long." Nina Williams vs Alexander Gaidar. Both grapple masters were totally focused on pitting their skills against each other, trying to prove each who the real grapple expert was. Both were grabbing, yanking, twisting and clutching each other, trying to trap their opponent in a hold, but being ultimately unsuccessful, as both of them were too experienced to be easily caught. The prolonging battle, however, became an amazing display of impressive feats of agility and skills, as the two combatants did whatever they could in order to break any kind of hold their opponent managed to obtain. After a while, Nina decided to break their stalemate and get some breathing room by delivering an overhead knife strike, followed in the same motion by an overhead back heel kick in a sweeping crescent moon arc that left a crimson streak on its passing. Ivory Cutter. Alexander was forced to leap backwards in order to avoid the attack. He and Nina stood on their feet staring at each other as they took advantage of the sudden pause to catch their breath. "You're good, I like that," Nina said with a cold smirk of satisfaction. Gaidar simply replied with a nod and a polite bow. "I aim to please my lady," he said, before both of them were at each other again. This time deciding to leave the grappling alone for the moment and go back to normal punches, Alexander took the initiative by launching an overwhelming barrage of punches that threatened to blow Nina away by their sheer power alone. Crescent Moon. Nina barely was able to withstand, certainly if she were not wearing a 100-pound turtle shell that added to her weight. She decided to retaliate by spinning to a side when one of Gaidar's punches was about to strike her and used a double palm strike to deliver a small explosive ball of Ki that struck Gaidar in his midsection, catching him completely off guard. Spiral Explosion. Not having expected Nina to be able to use Ki attacks, the small detonation left Gaidar dazed and defenseless for a follow-up. The blonde bombshell didn't waste the opportunity and rushed straight at her enemy, jumping towards him. She locked her legs around his hips and passed her left arm behind his neck to take a firm hold of him, completely making him carry the whole weight of her body plus the 100 pounds or so from her turtle shell. Crab Hold. The sudden and unexpected increase of weight caused the Russian soldier great difficulty to successfully struggle against it without failure. He wasn't able to resist it for long due to the awkward position he was in and he ended falling to the ground on his back. Nina capitalized on this as she moved her legs to trap Gaidar's right leg with them, then grabbing the limb also with her arms, she pulled it back while at the same time using her left leg to kick Gaidar in the face with her heel and finalized by snapping the Russian's leg. Heel hold. Nina then stood up while still taking hold of Gaidar's leg and turned around it until she was giving her back to her opponent, Gaidar's leg between her own. She then hugged the limb with her whole body and pulled back to snap it a second time. Double snap. Alexander didn't take kindly to the pain inflicted on him before he violently broke the hold on his leg with a sudden jerk and violently tackled Nina from her back and into the ground, pinning her down with his own body. The movement caught the blonde assassin off guard, as she hadn't expected Gaidar to recover that quickly. The Russian officer then passed his left arm underneath her left armpit before grabbing her from underneath her chin and pulling back, while at the same time, immobilizing her other arm by grabbing it from behind with his free arm and pulling it towards him before finalizing his technique by snapping both arms and neck in a single move. Haphazard Lock. After that move was done, Nina got back at him by kicking him between the legs. Both fighters then began to roll on the ground, trying to grapple at each other once more. It seemed this battle was going to take a while. Yuri vs Mikumo Kushinada. The young Korean woman was having a hard time trying to lay a single finger on the century-old but well-preserved Jiu-Jitsu grandmaster. For all the boasting she had made, Yuri was nowhere near in matching the speed of the elder woman. All of her attacks, punches and kicks were easily evaded with no seeming effort whatsoever. Not even her key attacks were useful as they too were simply dodged with little effort. It did nothing but increase the ire and frustration of the purple-clad woman. "Goddammit, stand still, would you?" she exclaimed as she blasted one of Kushinada's buncheons with a purple key projectile tossed with a kick. She was having enough of trying to hit the buxom woman and fail. So far all she has struck are all the buncheons that Kushinada has created to litter the entire place and confuse Yuri with, a strategy that has proved effective so far against the horn-styled haired woman. "As I had imagined," a voice said from behind Yuri. "You are too weak to face me. Not even in 100 years would you be able to reach my level." The purple-clad woman turned around to find Kushinada staring at her intently right in the eyes. She didn't have time to do anything else as a palm strike suddenly struck her right in the sternum. Yuri was blown away almost a dozen yards due to the powerful strength that the punch was packing. She struck the ground with a great impact, releasing a thick cloud of dust. Yuri skidded through the ground a few more meters before finally coming to a stop. She was left down on her knees retching at the powerful blow she had received. "I'll make you pay for this," she struggled to say as she kept spitting significant wads of saliva on the ground. Suddenly an ominous shadow fell upon the downed woman. Yuri looked up to see Kushinada standing right over her with an unmovable expression, one of her legs raised high in the air right above Yuri's head. "Stay down," Kushinada commanded, before she brought her leg down right on top of Yuri's head, slamming her face first into the ground with such strength that it broke the earth apart and left Yuri with her head buried in a massive crater with spiderweb cracks all around the point of impact. Kushinada just huffed, as if utterly crushing another human being was nothing but a nuisance for her. She lazily raised a delicate eyebrow when she saw that Yuri refused to go down that easily. The younger woman struggled greatly to get back up again, even with Kushinada's foot pressing down on her head, blood trickling down her temple and the side of her face as she gritted her teeth in outrage. With great effort, she managed to raise her head off the ground and stare up at the older woman looking down on her imperiously, the Kai reactor in her eyes shining with increasing intensity. "I will not be defeated that easily. I will not allow myself to lose before I make you bleed first." She spat, pain giving way to anger, anger that gave her the strength to keep moving on. Kushinada, however, was not impressed by her defiance. "You brats, always being a bother," she said disdainfully, before with a sudden movement, taking her foot off Yuri's head and sinking it into her side, sending the younger woman skidding through the landscape once more with a powerful kick. Sai Kagero vs Rin Tachibana. Rin didn't waste a moment to launch himself at his taller opponent, confident in the superiority of his skills. It did nothing but to simply increase the blow to his morale when he was forced to get away from the taller swordsman, lest he found himself being torn apart by the deadly slashes that he delivered almost automatically. Rin found himself being unable to get close to Sai as he had to immediately block a deadly slash every time he tried to get near him on a distance less than 3 meters. Suffice to say, he hadn't been most successful in landing a single proper attack on his opponent, all the while Sai hadn't done anything but stand in there rooted on his spot with his usual empty gaze. Auto slash. I never thought that my first battle after swearing to never use my swordsmanship skills to kill again would have been against Mike Chan's own brother. But I guess this was how it was meant to be. What better way to test my new resolve than to face someone of the same style that made me forsake the way of killing forever. Do not worry, Mike Chan's brother. I'll make sure to show you the strength of my conviction by defeating you without killing you. Sai said as he prepared to launch his own attack, a deep determination burning inside his eyes. Rin didn't have to reply before he was forced to raise his sword to defend himself from a sudden overwhelming barrage of impossible fast slashes. Sai attacks were being delivered with such speed, that by the time the young ninja was able to hear the sound of the hoe cutting through the air, Sai had already resheathed his weapon once more into his back and began to deliver the next slash. Supersonic slash. Rin found himself hard-pressed to keep up with Sai's speed. Sweat began to fall down his forehead as he barely was able to avoid the tall black-clad man's attack without getting overwhelmed. It seemed his victory was not going to be so easy after all. Dr. Jackal vs Edeltraft von Schira. For what little time this battle has been going on, one could already tell that it was Dr. Jackal who had the complete advantage over his enemy. Even though he had yet to move from his spot, he had effectively pinned down Edeltraft in one place, as the European man had found himself unable to move anywhere without a bloody scalpel about to strike him in his heart. It was distressing to witness the unnatural accuracy that Dr. Jackal possessed, as every single of his throws, even the ones he tossed at random or without paying attention, would have hit a vital spot if Edeltraft had not blocked them with his broadsword. Even his supersonic speed was not enough to avoid the bloody projectiles, as they always were about to struck him no matter how fast or where he moved. It was as if the scalpels could move and maneuver through the air on their own in order to always hit their target. Just what kind of person did Dr. Jackal was? There was no way a normal human being, no matter how skilled, could always strike on the bull's-eye without fail, more so against a fast-moving target. Currently, Edeltraft could do little but wave his sword around to block the seemingly unending barrage of bloody scalpels that threatened to turn him into a pincushion. And he certainly believed it to be unending, as the scalpels disappeared from all sight the moment they fell to the ground, to where? He couldn't know, but he had the feeling that those were not your regular operating scalpels. He suspected a more esoteric origin for the crimson weapons. As he mulled on these thoughts, the rain of crimson projectiles kept showering him in their single-minded focus of terminating with his life. Bloody stream. Edeltraft had enough already. If he kept any more time on the same spot without moving, he was certain he would be overwhelmed sooner or later. It seemed he didn't have a choice. He would have to brave the bloody scalpels if he wished to launch any kind of attack and break the stalemate. On the next scalpel hitting his blade, Adeltraft swung his weapon upwards in the same movement and then downwards in a powerful looping stroke that released a massive pressure wave that wrecked the entire field apart as it made its way towards Dr. Jackal. The hat-covered man was forced to move for the first time in the battle in order to avoid the destructive wave. Ruin Frieden. Dr. Jackal landed gracefully back into the ground, his smile hadn't faltered one bit. Adeltraft sheathed his weapon with a smile, believing he had been successful in breaking Jackal's momentum. The ever-smiling man simply straightened his tie and stated, "Not bad, for a moment I thought this battle was about to end without you fighting back. However, I'm afraid whatever you tried to accomplish with that technique has proved fruitless in the end." He finished, beaming his smile some more. The European man had a look of incomprehension for a moment, but when he tried to take a single step, he found himself being struck by an overwhelming pain. He swept his gaze over his own body in horror, trying to assess his condition, only to find both his arms and legs riddled by the crimson scalpels. A pitiful whimper escaped from his lips as the strength of his limbs to keep him on his feet began to leave him, unable to comprehend how this had happened. He looked back at Dr. Jackal with actual fear on his eyes. "I guess it's time for an impromptu vivisection," the man in the dark suit said with another beaming smile as more scalpels began to appear between his fingers. "My God, what kind of man is that?" Ethan Stanley said, rearing back in dread. He and most of the lightly injured Yomi apprentices had awoken just in time to see the beginning of the latest set of battles. Something he was starting to regret as he could have done without witnessing the unearthly abilities of Dr. Jackal. At his side, a wide-eyed Boris Ivanov was nodding in agreement. Pan simply let out a bristle in reply. "This is why I wanted to keep Dr. Jackal in reserve until the more powerful opponents had come forth. For I knew there was going to be a bloodshed the moment he stepped foot in the battlefield. I guess I didn't wait it enough before getting him loose. I can tell this is not going to be enough to sat his bloodlust." She huffed, blowing a small puff of air. "Man, and here I wanted to keep the body count to a minimum. What do you mean, Pan?" Maxima asked, turning towards her. "There's about to be a slaughter," was her simple, plain answer. Yuri vs Mikumo Kushinada, the century-old Jujutsu Grandmaster, frowned slightly in displeasure at seeing how Yuri was still refusing to go down. The taekwondoist had managed with great effort to get back on her feet again and had somehow prevented herself from getting knocked down once more despite Kushinada's powerful attacks sending her ricocheting throughout the place, her fake eyes shining brightly with a piercing violet light. Kushinada was not amused. The eternal beauty used her speed to disappear from all sight once more, and reappeared right in front of the Korean woman with the intention of delivering another powerful palm strike into her midriff. It came as an utter surprise that Yuri actually managed to block that attack with her arms. An actual look of surprise escaped from the ancient Grandmaster for a moment, as the sound of their clash resonated through the place with a sudden tremor and the air was forcefully displaced from the point of impact. Yuri capitalized on her opponent's brief surprise and grabbed Kushinada's arm with both her hands, restraining the limb completely as she began to increase her hold in it while she looked at Kushinada straight in the eyes with a look of pure hate. "I told you, I'm not going to lose without making you bleed first," he declared as her eyes shone ominously and a thick dark purple aura began to emanate from her body. Kushinada wasn't fazed in the least by Yuri's threats, however. She just scoffed and looked back at the younger woman with a look of utter contempt. "Go to sleep," she simply said, before she placed her other hand on Yuri, and violently launched her directly into the ground with full force, the strength of the impact being so great as to make the entire field tremble for a moment and create a 5 meters wide crater, a deafening crack resonating throughout the place. The earth being roughly thrown away was sent high into the sky as the shockwave from the attack was felt by every single person on the field. Kushina style underground throw. The buxom Grandmaster simply let out an uncaring huff after finalizing her technique, her hands still pressing down over the mangled body of her opponent in the ground. "This is the end. I applaud your courage, but the outcome of this match was already certain from the beginning," she said, before a thick purple blast of Ki struck her full in the face, snapping her head back roughly. Fuhajin. Yuri stood up on her feet once more, the dark violet energy enveloping her completely. "I'm not done yet, old woman," she said in an acid voice. Kushinada actually took a step back after seeing her, unable to comprehend how was she still able to stand after that last attack. What? How is that you can still fight? I clearly heard the sound of your spine snapping when I smashed you into the ground. As if to answer her question, more cracks began suddenly to be heard and Kushinada was treated to the sight of Yuri's turtle shell crumbling into dust. Seems the answer is pretty obvious, don't you think? Yuri said mockingly. I see, it doesn't matter in the end. All you've really done is prolonging your suffering, for there is still no way for you to be able to defeat me, she stated with her usual cold stoicism, before she was forced to block a sudden powerful knee strike from Yuri delivered with such a speed that it almost caught Kushinada off guard. The eternal beauty didn't had a moment to rest as her eyes suddenly widened in surprise when Yuri's other foot suddenly materialized on the side of her face. Kushinada was barely able to avoid the kick by tossing her head backwards thanks to her own impossibly fast superhuman reflexes, Yuri's foot passing so close in front of her that it almost grazed her nose. She could clearly feel the pressure wave created by that fast attack. Kushinada leapt back to put some distance between her opponent and collect herself. She was utterly surprised when she felt something warm running down from her nose. She brought a hand up to lightly wipe it off and was shocked to see her fingers stained by her own blood. Kushinada was not amused. Yuri let out a maniacal laugh at seeing her opponent's shocked expression. I told you I would make you bleed, that it's only a sample of what it is to come. In case you are curious as to how I finally managed to touch you, my turtle shell added 100 extra pounds to my weight. I've carrying that thing under Pan's orders for almost a week without ever taking it off. It's been an excellent way to build my strength, but it had the drawback of reducing my speed greatly. Now that you've destroyed my shell, I can fight at full 100% of my capabilities. She declared with a roar as the dark aura surrounding her blazed with intensity, her fake eye too burning with an ethereal purple fire. Kushinada just looked at her with a serious face, her eyes shining with a pent-up cold fury. You should have stayed down when you had the chance. You could have spared yourself an entire world of pain. Pan whistled after witnessing the latest occurrence in Yuri's fight. Man, seems shit just got real for those two. She then assumed a thoughtful expression. This reminds me that I should have told them all to take their shells off. I had thought since they all have been wearing them for almost a week they had already got accustomed to the weight. Didn't expect for some of their opponents to be powerful enough as to need every advantage they can get against them. Oh well, that's an oversight that I can simply rectify. She said, before bringing two fingers to her lips and blowing a low piercing whistle that stopped all activity in the field and brought all attention upon her. Oh yeah, I forgot to tell you all, if you feel your turtle shells are getting in the way, you're all free to take them off if you want. Sorry for not mention it earlier, she stated nonchalantly, rubbing the back of her neck with a foolish grin. Her followers simply stared at her for a moment, before the sound of many heavy weights striking the ground began to be heard. The fights then resumed immediately as if nothing had happened in the first place.